IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. It is Tuesday, February 17th. We are a little over a month away from Notre Dame kicking off spring practice. That is Sean Davis from Lucky Lefty Podcast. And Sean, you and I, shocker, we're talking about something that we thought, man, this should be a great topic to talk about on the show. So we're going to talk about today. Today's topic is going to be about, has Marcus Freeman lived up to expectations at Notre Dame? We'll talk kind of big picture, and then we'll go through different aspects of being a head coach. Talk about has he exceeded expectations, met expectations, or maybe not lived up to expectations. And then in the second part of the show, we're going to dive into sort of expectations for 2026. What Coach Freeman needs to do in 2026 for us to be able to say, okay, now he has met expectations in all these areas. He's lived up to these expectations, and kind of get into it from there. And this isn't going to be like a Homer show where we're just going to be like, oh, everything is awesome, it's amazing. We're going to talk about the things that we think Coach Freeman's done very well, and the areas where I think he still needs to be better. Because at the end of the day, you can't say he's necessarily exceeded expectations, because when you really look at Notre Dame, the expectation Notre Dame is to win a championship. And to me, no coach can ever exceed expectations entirely without winning a championship. But at what stage does that happen? Those are kind of the things that we're going to discuss. And it's such an important topic, Sean, because we are going into year 5 of Marcus Freeman. And it is that period where it's like, okay, the learning curve is over now. Now it's time to say, okay, let's figure some things out, because he's experienced so many things now as a head coach. You know, the 25 season was so unique because they were coming off such a great 2024 campaign, which was unlike anything anyone had really experienced. I mean, the only two teams that have ever experienced that were Notre Dame and Ohio State, since it was the first year of the 12-team playoff. And so there's just all these things out there that go into what's the job he's done so far, what aspects of coaching has he done, and then what do we want to see in 26? At the end of that, we will do a mailbag. So if you want Sean and I to answer some of your questions, just go ahead and put an MB, capital M, capital B at the beginning of your question. That way we know it's a question, not just general conversation of the chat. Or you can put in a mailbox emoji there, and we'll see it that way. If you want to get your question bumped to the top, just leave a super chat. And if you put a super chat in there and we think it's relevant to what we're talking about, we may actually bring it up during the show and address it during the show. So, Sean, again, thanks for being with me today, my friend. Appreciate you as always. Let's give some background onto why this is the topic of today's show.
Yeah, so basically the conversation started with, I woke up, it was about a week ago today, maybe a little bit over a week ago, and I was going through my YouTube, scrolling down my YouTube, and I guess it was like the 4-year anniversary of your show that you did with Vince when when Brian Kelly was leaving for LSU, right? And so you guys started the show, you went through all the candidates, everyone that might be possible on the short list that might be talked about, and then you got to Marcus Freeman, right? And you got to Marcus Freeman, and I could just sense that it was a lot of questions surrounding Marcus Freeman. Like, he doesn't have any experience. If they did go that route, it would be a risk involved. Not sure if a lot of people would support it. Jack Swarbrick would be putting a lot on the line for himself personally to go ahead and make that decisions. But you did talk about, what you heard from people, parents connected, that how much he was beloved by the players. And, from that standpoint, you were just talking about, you look forward to seeing how Notre Dame is going to handle this, because one of the things you pointed out is that this was a perfect time. You talked about transition, and you said this is the perfect time for Notre Dame to transition away from the previous head coach. Like, the program is at a place where they should be able to survive and maintain. And if they make the right decision, whomever comes in should be able to go on and continue to win at Notre Dame. And so that was kind of the beginning. And then I called you and I asked you this question. I said, I listened to your show. It popped up from 4 years ago. And I said, man, this is what I felt like you guys were feeling at that point in time. And then I asked you, like, what were your thoughts about Marcus Freeman at that point in time? And then I just said, man, has Marcus Freeman lived up to expectations? Has he exceeded your expectations, or has he been underwhelming as far as expectations? As we talk, we say, you know what, this would be a great conversation to have in a lot of different areas, because we can look at it big picture, but we can look at it nuanced in particular areas where he needs to improve in some areas. Maybe he has been underwhelming in certain aspects. Some other aspects he's probably exceeded, and some he's met. And so it should be an interesting conversation. And so that's why we're going to talk about it here today, because I just thought the way you guys handled that particular show at the beginning, which was a really good objective perspective, in my opinion, because I think there were a lot of names out there that were probably hotter names. Like, say, for instance, the new Penn State head coach at that point in time was a really hot name that a lot of
Luke Fickell was a hot name as well. Yeah,
Cincinnati,
he was leading
absolutely.
Cincinnati to the playoffs. Yeah,
right. So just think about if those two had been hired.
Jeff Brom is another one.
Jeff Brum's another one. Think about what those guys have done at their spots.
Yeah.
And then what Marcus Freeman was able to do as a first-time head coach is like, how do you really judge? Is he underwhelmed, met it? It's just an interesting conversation to have.
And I would, Sean, it's not in our outline, but I think that would actually be a fun thing to add to the topic of conversation at some point at the end. How do we think other candidates for the job would have done at Notre Dame? Because the landscape of what Marcus Freeman is going through as a head football coach right now is so dramatically different than what he walked into. I mean, we knew that the NIL stuff was coming. It wasn't like they just sprung that on us in 23. We knew that was coming. But I don't know that even the people who were warning that this is what we were going to see, like myself, like you, it's been even worse than I thought it was going to be. And we were people saying, like, this is what's going to happen, and it's worse. What's interesting is I had written an article that fall about Marcus Freeman Brian Kelly should name Marcus Freeman his head coach in waiting, because we were kind of getting close to the end of the Brian Kelly tenure. We all knew he wanted out. We just didn't know it was going to be after 2021. You know what I mean? And I wrote that article, and I actually, what's interesting is little backstory. I don't mind sharing this. I actually called Marcus Freeman and said, hey, listen, I want to write this article, but I want to make sure you're cool with it, because I didn't want it to be something that creates issues. I didn't want it to be something where Brian Kelly looks at it and he sees this article and it creates some tension. Because I had already sensed that Brian Kelly was not a big fan of some of the attention that Marcus Freeman was getting. And he was kind of like that with Mike Mickens as well. When Mike Mickens started getting a lot of love in 2021, you'd hear Marcus, you'd see him on the sideline just getting extra dogged by Brian Kelly. And he was kind of that way. When a coach started getting a lot of fire under him, and a lot of love, Freeman would kind of jump in and be like, or not Freeman, but Kelly would kind of jump in and be like, okay, let me be hard on that guy or whatever. Because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't creating an issue. And he's like, no, you got to do what you got to do. That was his answer. Like, hey, I'm not going to tell you what to write or what not to write. If it's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. I was like, cool. That was basically him saying, like, I don't have a problem with it. So I wrote the article, and I think the only surprise was the timing for Notre Dame was great to make a change, but I don't know that the timing for Marcus Freeman was ideal to have the overwhelming support of the fan base, because he hadn't been here quite long enough to say, okay, like he was a year removed from being the DC at Cincinnati. And so I thought the timing for Notre Dame was perfect, but I didn't know the timing was for Marcus Freeman was perfect. You kind of wanted him to have a little bit more seasoning, maybe an extra year or two as the D coordinator to get to know Notre Dame a little bit better and learn some of the challenges that goes with being there. Because even if you're the D coordinator, you can see the challenges that your head coach is dealing with being the head football coach. And so he learned those things in that first year. But if you really think about it, he was only on the job 10 months, 11 months before Brian Kelly bounced. And so that's kind of what made it a very interesting time. But it was definitely a risk for Jack Swarbrick to hire a coach who had not been a first-time head coach. Because what was the thing that we all said? I mean, even people who supported Marcus Freeman, I was supportive of the hire. As a matter of fact, there was a lot of people that were saying it was going to be Luke Fickell. And I kept saying, nope, it's not going to be Luke Fickell. I'm telling you guys, like, Swarbrick wants Freeman. Now, the question, however, was I think Jack Swarbrick also knew the timing wasn't perfect either. I think Jack Swarbrick envisioned it kind of like I envisioned it, which is let Freeman be here a couple years, and then, you know, when Kelly leaves down the road, he'll be the guy. I don't know that he necessarily anticipated it. However, you can't dismiss the notion that having Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame allowed Jack Swarbrick to play hardball with Brian Kelly in a way that he had not played hardball with Brian Kelly in the past. He had always kind of given Brian Kelly whatever he wanted. I don't think it's a coincidence. And again, this is me reading between the lines. This isn't something I've ever been told. This is an intel. So I want to make sure I'm always clear when I'm giving you stuff that I was told, and I'm giving you stuff that's just my opinion or my read on the situation. But Kelly kind of went to him up for a lot that offseason and during the season and waged this PR campaign about how great of a job he was doing because he wanted yet another pay raise. And for the first time, Jack really was like, no. And for the first time, I really felt like Jack Swarbrick was ready to let Brian Kelly walk. Remember, this is a guy that put his own reputation on the line in 2016 to retain Brian Kelly coming off a 4-8 year. Put his entire reputation as the AD at Notre Dame on the line to retain a guy that went 4-8. Like, he had fought hard for Kelly over the years, and he just let him walk. Why? I think a big part is because he was willing to bet on Marcus Freeman. And as we dive into this, we're going to talk about expectations and all that. But the first thing I think we can say is, Sean, I think his bet paid off. Whether you think he's ultimately lived up to these expectations or exceeded, I think when you look at the success Notre Dame has had in so many different areas, even the ups and downs, as Marcus Freeman has gone through his own share of ups and downs, and there's things he still has to get better at. I think you have to look and say Jack Swarbrick's gamble certainly paid off. Certainly paid off. And that's where I think we can start with this one, Sean.
I think Jack Swarbrick is a visionary, just going back to 2016. And then, you know, what he got from Brian Kelly from that standpoint was a pretty good head coach, a top 10 head coach in college football at that point, even after the 4-8 season. And they were able to resurrect, make good coaching hires. As you can tell, the guys that were hired after that season have gone on to be pretty good head coaches elsewhere. And then on top of that, I think he's a visionary. And I think Jack Swarbrick is very calculated. And I think for the first time, leverage is a key word to use right there. He was able to leverage that situation to get what he wanted. But he also knew, even in the risk he was taking, that he could leverage what he knew was coming, which was less pressure to go undefeated or lose one game, which is basically what Brian Kelly had to endure. One of the architects of the playoff expansion that knew it was coming and was on the horizon was Jack Swarbrick. So he knew the things that he was going to be negotiating, the things that would kind of make it more, I don't want to say make it easier, but make it more comfortable for a head coach in Notre Dame. And what better situation to allow a first-time head coach to walk into with a little bit more cushion and a little bit less pressure in the regular season. So it was a risk, but I think it was something that he knew would be a little bit more calculated. Would he have taken it knowing that the playoff was going to stay at 4 teams and then Notre Dame's schedule was going to continue to be what it was, where they play tough not out of conference, but play tough competition from all conferences? But I think he took a calculated risk that he knew, and basically observing. I would be very interested in a sit down with Jack Swarbrick one of the questions I would ask him is, what was the moment you knew? Like, he is a defensive coordinator. Were you at a practice? Was it during the interview where you were like, yo, this guy is going to be a head coach one day?
It was during the process of bringing him to Notre Dame as the D coordinator. Yes, it was from what I've talked to some people about this, it was all the way back then. Now,
wow.
Jack Swarbrick deserves a lot of credit for getting Marcus Freeman here from the standpoint of Marcus Freeman was a hot commodity at the time. And remember, LSU wanted him as their DC. He was a major hot commodity. Brian Kelly is the one who wanted to hire Freeman, but Swarbrick is the one that had to financially make it happen. And so he would meet with people when he would in situations like that. And I was told that he met with Freeman during that process and was really impressed by him. And so already had his mind going into Freeman's tenure of, let me evaluate this guy. And it was very clear early on that Freeman had a lot of those chops that I think that were valued by Jack Swarbrick and for the Notre Dame head coach. That I think he was sort of looking, if I can just be honest here, he was looking for the anti-Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly had a reputation for not treating people well. It's kind of a jerk to a lot of people on campus unless he needed you. He wasn't someone that a lot of people cared for. He was never around other sporting events. Just kind of, he did his own thing. He was Brian Kelly. And right away, Freeman was just someone who, because that's just who he is, Sean. It's like, look, he meets a janitor, he talks to him and, hey, how are you? That's kind of how it was. I don't know if he's still like that. I'm not around the program and such, but like, that's how he was when he first got hired. And you talk to people in Cincinnati and they're like, yeah, he was like that here too. And that's just kind of how he is. I would assume he's still that way. But so there was a lot of that engagement. You could tell the way the players reacted to him, and there was a lot of things that Freeman did to win over the players that mattered to Jack. I've shared one of them with you, was his first game as D coordinator. Do you remember that long touchdown run that Florida State had in that game? So as soon as they got to the sideline, the players, I talked to a couple dads about this, and they said that, and this was like right after the game. This isn't me talking to them a year down the road. This is me talking to them like that weekend. And I had a couple dads on the defense call me, and they're like, man, you got to hear this story. I'm like, all right, what's up? He goes, so the boys come off the field after that long touchdown, and they're just waiting to get ripped by Freeman. Because that's what it's like at Notre Dame. You make a mistake, and you're going to get ripped on the sidelines. Kelly was that way. And I don't know that Clark Lee was that way, but, like, that's how Kelly is. And so they get to the sideline, and Freeman comes over there, and he gets in their face, and he's like, that's on me. He sent in the wrong call. And he said, I sent in the wrong call. That's on me. And he just kind of went off like, hey, it's not going to happen again. That's on me. We're going to, and like the players kind of immediately like, oh, this guy is like, okay, this guy is going to, have our backs if we need it. And there was just stuff like that. There was a level of accountability that was so foreign to a lot of the players when it came to, especially the head football coach. This isn't so much a shot at Clark Lee. I think Clark Lee was someone who had a lot of respect from the players as well. This is more so about what it was like with the head football coach. And there just were things like that immediately gravitated the players to him, and that mattered a lot to Jack Swarbrick when he hired Marcus Freeman. Was he's a player's coach, but not in the way that I think you and I would not want to hire a player's coach. Like, I don't want a player's coach that like thinks he's one of the guys. I don't want you to be their best friend. I want you to be their flipping head football coach. I don't want that guy that changes his personality to be cool and accepted by teenagers. Like, I don't want that guy. That guy's a snake oil salesman. He wanted someone that was a player's coach in that he showed belief in them. They showed belief in him, and they were all working towards a common goal. And the players felt like Freeman cared about them beyond just the head football coach. That's why they reacted the way they did when he was announced as the head football coach. That was genuine. That was extremely genuine, because there was a thought of like, okay, this guy cares about us. This guy has our back. That was completely the anti of what the program had been. And trust me, Jack Swarbrick knew that was a beef within the locker room, especially the last few years. And so I think a lot of those things about him being the anti-Brian Kelly were why Jack Swarbrick was immediately attracted to him. Plus, he's engaging. He's got a great personality. He's smart. he's been wanting to be a head coach for a while, so he had kind of a vision. And look, Marcus Freeman came to Notre Dame knowing that his success here was going to present him with an opportunity to be a head coach somewhere. So he was already working on what you all did this. When I was an assistant coach, I had an offensive coordinator book. I had a head coach book, notes that you'd take on if I become a head coach, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. We all have it. And so when I interviewed for head coaching jobs, I put it into an official book, and here's my plan. And so you're always working on those things. And I'm confident that Marcus Freeman had one of those things, which is kind of what you should do. But what I think concerned Swarbrick and why it wasn't an immediate hire was the lack of experience. And the fact that he'd been at Notre Dame less than a year when you promoted him head coach. And why does that matter? No, it doesn't matter at a lot of places. It matters a lot at Notre Dame. Because if you think about it, the last was it 2 head coaches that were hired without any head coaching experience were failures. And then obviously you could say the last 3 if you want to count Jerry Faust, who had never been a head coach in college. He'd only been a head coach in high school. So I think there were some reservations. And you could even go back to coaches back in the day that had not been head coaches that had struggles at Notre Dame. I think that was some of the hesitation, and the fact that Jack knew this is my last big hire. You know what I mean? Like this is the hire that's going to define my legacy. And so somebody in the chat said that there were people that were saying it was a lazy process. I can assure you that it was not. And there were people that Jack Swarbrick talked to that didn't become public to see if they'd be interested. Dave Clawson being one. He reached out to him just to gauge his interest. So he went through the process. But it was very clear to me that Freeman was the guy he wanted. And what I was told is, like, when he finally knew, he went into the meeting where he interviewed Freeman formally as kind of open-minded as he could be. And he came out of that meeting saying, this is the guy. I think Jack just had to convince some other people that Freeman was the guy. And that's where I think some of the Luke Fickell stuff was coming from, was other people at Notre Dame that's who they were pushing for. But I remember when Dennis Dodd had his, hey, I'm hearing Fickell's the guy, I was like, nope, I'm telling y'all that's not it, because I had sources that were connected to Jack. And Jack was very much unless Freeman screws this up during the interview process, I think that's the direction he wanted to go, unless he was blown away or somebody, like if Nick Saban would have called and said, hey, you know what? I'd like to coach Notre Dame. Sorry, Marcus, you're not getting a job. You know what I mean? It's going to go to Nick Saban. There was always that possibility, but unless something like that happened, this is the direction he wanted to go. And so I think those are the 2 moments that I think are the kind of the 3 moments that led to Marcus Freeman being the guy that was hired by Jack Swarbrick, despite the fact that there was a bit of an uproar by some of the older folks that had lived through the failures of inexperienced coaches. And I think that was justified. And honestly, we saw why those concerns were valid in Marcus Freeman's first 2 seasons as the head football coach at Notre Dame. You saw him live through those. This is why you don't put training wheels on the head football coach at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? You got someone who knows how to ride this thing. And that's kind of part of when you evaluate Marcus Freeman, Sean. So let's kind of go through and ask this, Sean. Let's set the stage. What were the expectations for Marcus Freeman when he was hired that we're going to even look back at and say, okay, this is what's going to evaluate? So let's go through the main areas. Let's first and foremost, we'll go recruiting. We'll talk about building a staff, and then we'll talk about maximizing the team's potential, and then all that goes into that. So let's first start off, and then the last thing is, we'll talk about, do we think Freeman, the last one is, do you think this coach has the chops to be a championship caliber coach? So let's go through those, Sean, and let's start off with recruiting. And has Marcus Freeman lived up to expectations? Because I think when he was hired, that's the one area that I think we all thought there was a level of confidence that he would perform well at Notre Dame. And boy, I think he certainly lived up to expectations in that regard.
And I went back and forth with this because I had to take a look back. I think I went back to 2015. And I really think that the recruiting for Notre Dame if you believe what Brian Kelly said, which is Notre Dame has to shop down a different aisle, and you look at the rankings, which hovered around anywhere from 8 to 12, depending upon
the occasional
publication.
2013 team, or 13 class, the occasional top 5 class, but mostly 8 to 12.
Yeah, and so now we really have to have a discussion. Man, welcome the chat, and I can't wait to hear your response, because if you look at the numbers initially over the first 4 years of Marcus Freeman, 3 of the 4 years from a ranking standpoint would tell you Notre Dame really there hasn't been much of a difference, because Notre Dame I think his first year they were 9th, then I think they were 10th, and they had a year where they were 12th. I can't remember offhand. I think that was according to 247, I believe. I didn't look at any other the publications. But my point is, I think you missed the boat if you just look at the numbers and you don't see the other things that were underlying aspects of those recruiting classes that showed that Notre Dame was making an imprint to make the 2026 class possible. The 2026 class was not a one-off season result or manifestation. That was the results of 3 years of changing narratives, forging relationships, going back into areas that were deserts for Notre Dame recruiting wise, and taking the challenge of expanding and planting the Notre Dame recruiting flag in areas that the flag was at half mast, per se. Just the situation was just dead. Notre Dame was dead in certain areas. And even though you lost out on certain kids in those early years that you were like, Notre Dame doesn't have a chance. Eventually, by the time you got to the second year, you start to hear, oh, this kid has a little more interest. You start to see kids take unofficials. And then it was like, okay, we have to get them on for an official now. Then you saw kids get on for an official, but Notre Dame just couldn't close. And eventually, Notre Dame gets all of those guys on for an official on the same weekend, and all of a sudden they close and come up with the second best class in the nation in 2026. So once again, no, I'm sorry, number one according to
can I just say something that's so dumb about that? On3 continues to say that Notre Dame has the number 2 class.
Yeah,
because they give the industry ranking instead of their own. Who does that? That is so dumb. Give your rankings. To me, because it's a cop-out to me. They can say, well, this is the industry. No, give your rankings. That's a different conversation for another day. But yes, the number 1 ranked class according to On3 Rivals.
So that is what's so interesting to me, right? The undercurrent was always there. The undercurrent was the things that we were hearing from recruits their recruits telling us that weren't coming to Notre Dame and were up front with us, myself and Ryan, like, yeah, I'm probably not coming to Notre Dame, but man, I love Coach Freeman, or I love Coach McCullough, or I really love Coach Heastan, right? Yeah. Like, there are other reasons why I'm not coming, but I love the coaching staff. Oh man, they're honest. I love the on and off the field conversation that they bring that's totally different than everybody else. I think there was an authenticity, and I'm going to give a shout out to Chad Bowden. Chad Bowden, I'll be honest with you, Chad brought an energy. He just brought an energy on the recruiting trail for Notre Dame. He did. And so
people laugh at some of the stuff he did, but the kids loved it, and it stood out. It made Notre Dame different at the time, and they needed something to be different at the time. Yeah.
And so for that, I think, because I've heard people say, well, the numbers are pretty much the same as, the predecessor. And I'm like, you're missing the boat, because the predecessor did that because he put no effort. That was just a result of him. I don't even want to go after the 5-star guys. I don't want to go after the top 50 guys. I'm not even going to try. Marcus Freeman was going after those guys. He was sitting at the table with Kirby, with Nick Saban, with Ryan Day, and saying, I'm here, and I'm going to keep coming back until I eventually start to get my share of these elite players. And now you're starting to see Notre Dame do that, right? It literally, if you go look at, there was a chance it could have been done earlier in 2023, if someone that is now on the roster stays in the class, and if someone that defected the roster on National Signing Day after being on the commit call the night before, acting as if they were in the class, if those two guys stay in the class, then more than likely, man, they're a top 5 class. Oh, the quarterback from Oregon, if there weren't outside factors outside of that particular young man in Notre Dame influencing him not to come out and just be verbally committed, but to publicly commit, does that impact another 5-star wide receiver in his recruitment when he goes elsewhere? There are so many things that was bubbling in an undercurrent that, we've hinted about, that were connected, that if all of those things went the way of Notre Dame in 2023 probably comes away with, at worst, the 5th ranked class in that cycle. So I think there are a lot of good things that were turned around probably quicker than most people on the recruiting trail. I'll say this: there are national reporters that were so used, pretty much had a template of what to write about Notre Dame with big time athletes. And literally they had to shift and say, wait a minute, I can't just insert name here and write the same article when it comes to Notre Dame. These kids really are interested in Notre Dame. They really like Marcus Freeman. They really like this coaching staff.
And at the time, Sean,
Brian Smith talked about it a lot.
Yeah. At the time, the thing that we said was, when they win, this is going to go crazy. Once Marcus Freeman this is what we would talk about at the time. Once Freeman gives them a reason on the field with success on the field to come, then it's going to go like gangbusters. So overall, you'd say, yes, he's met expectations as a recruiter.
As a recruiter, I think he's exceeded expectations. Okay. I think he's exceeded because of the undercurrent things,
right,
and what he had to change and how
he had to change the culture.
Doing it. Yes,
he had to change the entire culture of Notre Dame. Yes. And we're not going to shop down a different aisle. We're going to shop down a different aisle than everybody else, because we're going to shop down the same aisle that Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, teams like that are going down. There's three levels of recruiting to me that I evaluate. Number one is evaluations. Number two, fit. Are you able to get kids here that are good fits? Remember, you could argue that Brian Kelly's 2 best classes at Notre Dame, 11 and 13, had a lot of bad fits in it. A lot of kids that just weren't meant to be at Notre Dame. And some very weird situations. Even in 2012, you remember the Devontae Neal situation. You remember Deontay Greenberry and T. Shepard and a lot of those type of things that were not great. I would say I think there's, like somebody in the chat said, prior to the last class, he was underachieving. I think that's utter nonsense. I think it's utter nonsense to say that he was not meeting expectations, because how did you build the roster that played for the title? Here's the problem. You see, what we saw was the evaluations fit, and then can you close? The closing on the top level kids is needed work. That's what's changed in the last 2 to 3 cycles. But we said in the 23 class, like, there was a lot of bad evaluations that were being made by national people. If Benjamin Morrison was properly ranked coming out of high school, if Leonard Moore was properly ranked coming out of high school, if Drake Bowen was properly ranked coming out of high school, we go, Tay Osbury was not a top 100 recruit. He was not a top 100 recruit coming out of high school. Should have been. And the problem is, people that don't think that he recruited well or underachieved from a recruiting standpoint, but just got the most out of the players, that's because you believe 247 instead of me and instead of Notre Dame. That's still the problem that you have. And the only reason you think this class was so much better than the others is because of now the recruiting services are coming around. And I do think this is his best class. But we tried to tell you on 23 and 24 that this class was way better than people thought that it was. And look what that class has done at Notre Dame the last 2 years. They've been played a huge role in this team's success. You don't win 14 games and play for the title in the 12-team playoff by just out-coaching people. You do that because you have better athletes than even apparently some of your own fan base even thinks that you have. So I think one thing that they've done a great job of is evaluation. Where was Boubacar Traore ranked coming out of high school? So I got to ask you this, Sean. Did Notre Dame get Boubacar? Did Notre Dame coach Boubacar Traore up so well that he was able to play beyond his talent level of that of a guy who was ranked number 291 overall by On3, number 141 overall by 247, number 222 by Rivals, and wasn't even in the top 250 of Rivals? Excuse me, he was top 222 by ESPN and not even the top 250 by Rivals. Or maybe Notre Dame saw a different evaluation than everybody else, and they were right. Same thing with Leonard Moore. Marcus, I can promise you this. Mike Mickens treated Leonard Moore like a 5-star recruit because he knew what kind of talent he had. And I even had, I was like, look, I love the athleticism. I love the size, but I needed to see more of a senior year, had a 4.5-star upside grade. I even undersold it a little bit. And so to me, it was the 23 and 24 classes that laid the foundation for what this team is. Who are all the players so let me ask you this question. Do you expect Notre Dame to be a championship title contender in 2026? So I'm going to ask you that, Chief. Do you expect Notre Dame to be a championship team in 2026? If the answer is yes, who are the drivers of that? It's a bunch of guys that were recruited in the 23 and 24 classes, correct? Your quarterback's in the 24 class. Your top 2 running backs from the 24 class. Your top 2 receivers in the 23 class. Your starting tight end is in the 23 class. Your starting offensive line, if it is what we think it's going to be and what we hope it's going to be, has, 1, 2, 3, 4 guys that were recruited prior to 2025, 2026, right? Your starting defensive line. Who do we anticipate being the best player in that class on the D line? It's Boubacar. Who's the other big-time talent that we think is there? It's Bryce Young. Again, guys recruited before 2026. Who we talk about Notre Dame, deepest linebacker room in college football. Those guys aren't 25, 26 recruits. They're 22, 23, and 24. Actually, 23 and 24 recruits. Your secondary, Don Schuler. What class did he come from? 23. Tay Johnson, what class did he come from? 24. So he says, so we were content with the 23 and 24 classes. Yeah. All your best players on this team that you think is going to play for a championship are driven by the 23 and 24 classes. So yeah. And it's those classes that set the foundation for even better classes. That's the whole point. So you're saying, I think they're going to win a title built on players from the 23 and 24 classes, but then we're going to say they underachieved in recruiting in those years. And it goes back to I'm focusing on this because, again, we're not second guessing Marcus Freeman's evaluations for this class. Why? Because Rivals and On3 and 247 agree with Notre Dame. Did Notre Dame, and I think this is their best class in most areas. But this is kind of along the lines of what they did in 23 and 24. And that's what laid the foundation for where Notre Dame is right now. Those and I told you then those were 23 and especially 24 was an elite class. I told you all then. Some of you didn't believe me. Why? Because Andrew Ivins didn't think so. Who cares? Notre Dame did, and I did. And guess who was right? Us. Which is why Notre Dame had so many freshmen and sophomores playing. I mean, think about how many 23 and 24 players were starting on the team that played for the title. The team that beat Georgia by 13. The team that beat Penn State. Right? It's 23 and 24 recruits. It's CJ. Like going into 26. It's CJ. It's Aeneas. It's Jaden Greathouse. It's Jordan Faison. It's Kingston. It's Drake Bowen. It's Tay Johnson. Leonard Moore. Christian Gray. Adon Schuler. Boubacar. Bryce Young. All their best players are from the 23 and 24 classes. So that's where I come from. You have evaluation, fit, and you've gotten better with your ability to close. In 23, they had some big misses. You can't deny that. That was an excellent class. It would have been even better if they would have got Keon. Well, he's here now, but I don't give him credit for that because it would have been nice to have him at the beginning so you could have developed them. So I'm not going to retro. Well, they got Keon in the 23. No, they didn't. They haven't had him the last 3 years. But the job you did recruiting him then is why he's coming back now. But when you look at that 23 class, that was a great foundational class. And they built on it in 2024. You got to remember, too, part of the success you had in 23 was because you had already gotten a commitment from an elite quarterback in 24. Because you got super early. And so you look at that class, and the 24 class, I don't care what anybody says, that was an elite class. I mean, this is who was in that class. C.J. Carr, Bryce Young, Kingston Viliama-Asa, Cam Williams, Gerby Lambert, Keedron Young, Tay Johnson, Micah Gilbert, Logan Thomas, Aeneas Williams, Leonard Moore. See here, guys that are going to Anthony Knapp. That's a pretty darn good class. And those are just guys that I mentioned. I didn't even mention everybody in the class. That's a pretty an elite class. And that laid the groundwork for what came. I will say the 25 class is the one that underachieved. That class as a whole, I'll give you that one, that class underachieved. We talked about that. But on the whole, and that was more of an offensive problem, on the whole, the recruiting has been outstanding. And what's also part of recruiting is portal recruiting. And I think that's an area where Freeman has had a lot of success. You've got to give a lot of credit to Notre Dame as an institution as well, of being able to make adjustments and work with the football staff to allow them to go get – because people forget, Riley Leonard was an undergrad transfer. Bo Collins was an undergrad transfer. Malachi Fields was an undergrad transfer as far as when they first committed. Malachi was on pace to graduate and have a fifth year. But like Bo wasn't. Bo had to finish up his schooling at Clemson. Riley had to finish up schooling at Clemson. So I think that's part of it as well. So when I look at recruiting, Sean, great evaluation across the board. Look, and some of them I wasn't even high on. I thought Anthony Knapp would have played as a junior like he played as a freshman. You got to give Joe Rudolph a lot of credit for that evaluation. We can debate, should he be playing tackle or guard? What you can't debate is he has exceeded his expectations of him as a player. There's no doubt about that. Those are the kind of strong evaluations we talk about, Sean, because Notre Dame is still plugging holes with the portal. Very small holes. Look at their size of their portal class compared to everybody else. So I think when you look at it, I think I agree with you. I think they've exceeded expectations from a recruiting standpoint. It took time to get there. Part of that was the coaching staff learning lessons. Part of that was you had to give kids a reason, Sean. And we talked about this. You have to give some of these kids a reason to come to Notre Dame. And I think the 24 season was that reason. And that's what laid the groundwork for the class that you've got coming in. So I said at the time, the 23 and 24 classes were top 5 classes. Said at the time, they were top 5 classes. And I think we've been proven to be right on that. That those are, especially 24, was a top 5 class.
Look, this is something that lays the groundwork, because you pretty much killed that debate about underachieving. Let me just give you the last 5 recruiting classes under the previous head coach. 18 was number 10. 19 was 16th. 20 was 18th. 21 was 9th. It's like, so a 16 and an 18? Marcus Freeman doesn't have that on his resume. So if he's coming in with that being previous to him, and he has consistently been 12th or higher until this year, and it started out, I mean, if you want to give him some of the 22 class where I think they were ranked, which I 7, do. Okay, so they were ranked 7. They were
defensive players. They were ranked high because of all the guys he went out and got on defense.
That 22 class, look, we talked about this. Go look at the hit rate. See, that's something else we have to talk about. You can get all these 5 stars, but if your hit rate is really low, then what does it really mean? The development is part of recruiting as well on the back end. Notre Dame's hit rate in these classes is well over 80%, where the guys they bring in are contributing. They're contributors on different levels on the football field. And that's what's more important. The 25 class is nuanced, right? Because we talk about dominoes. We talked about the dominoes in the 23 class. You said the 25 class is primarily what? Offensive issues.
Yeah.
Right?
Offense and I would say D-line to a degree.
To a degree, right? So let's talk about the offensive issues. Those offensive issues were primarily connected to someone, a big-time recruit, that was sold a bill of goods, and he fell for it. He was sold something, he fell for it. A year later, he's no longer at that place, and the people he bought it from, they're no longer there. And because of that, now you see a Tenure Hines or other big-time receivers go elsewhere. And it happens. It happens. You get what well, when someone fraudulently sells somebody a bill of goods, and them and their people around them buy hook, line, and sinker, I can't put that on Notre Dame.
I kind of do from a degree, because they should have seen the writing on the wall way sooner.
We agree on that. We agree on that totally.
And that was an unforced error. I think another issue with that class, Sean, and this is not an excuse, you did not do the job you needed to do in 25, was you were going through the transition of a new offensive coordinator. And you had some guys committed that you needed to try to figure out a way to work out of the class. And there were some decisions made. I think Chad Bowden did a tremendous job at Notre Dame. I don't think the 25 class was his best work. And I think we now know why. You know, he didn't just up and decide on the Tuesday, I'm out of here. You know, I think we kind of know why. But what I will say about recruiting, forget, you know, and I always love going back and forth with Chief, because he'll sit and take it, and I appreciate that, you know, and he doesn't take it personally. But evaluation, I think they've done a great job of evaluation for the most part. Finding guys that fit. You don't see a lot of guys leaving on their own. I think that speaks to the fit. You haven't seen a lot of guys getting in trouble at Notre Dame. There's some academic issues and some kids that, you know, face some minor, you know, kids being college kids, discipline, things like that. You haven't seen the major issues. And I'll be honest with you, there were some things going on early in Marcus Freeman's tenure that was a carryover from the Brian Kelly era that my understanding is not the issue that it is now. And I'll just say this, it involved a lot of extracurricular activities in apartments and houses that they were staying in. Okay. And I think I could be wrong, but my understanding is a lot of that has been kind of nipped in the bud a little bit, pun intended. And so I think that is something that those issues to me are not as big of an issue now from what I understand. So I think part of that is fit. And I think where we've seen improvement from Notre Dame in the last few years is I don't think they offered anybody different in 26 that wasn't what they had offered in past years. The difference now is instead of not getting Keon or getting him and then losing him, you get Rodney Dunham, you get Ebenezer, and you keep them. You know, you close on Caden Finley. You close on Ian Premer. You know, you close on Grayson McHugh. You close on Tiki Holy. You close on Elijah Golden and beat Oklahoma and Alabama. Sean, 5 years ago, if I'd have told you Notre Dame's going to go beat a kid who has over a 2-year stretch in Florida, has over 60 tackles for loss, about 30 sacks, and Alabama and Oklahoma are just dying to have him, and he plays D-line, Notre Dame wants him. What would your odds of Notre Dame getting that kid would have been? Like slim to none.
Very slim to none.
From Florida. You know what I mean? And instead, they get him, Elijah Golden. And then they hold on to him the entire time. Not one kid that I'm aware of visited another school after he committed. And they didn't have a single decommitment in that class. Not one. That speaks to evaluation, fit, and the ability to close. And I think that is something where, the Kari Adams, I don't see Notre Dame getting Kari Adams 45 years ago. Like you didn't see that. Or you'd have got them like they did Peyton Bowen, and then you lose them late in the process. I think now they've been able to identify the right kind of players. They've learned from their mistakes. If kids have the mindset of Peyton Bowen, they don't play those games anymore. They just move on. If this staff now was the staff we had in the 23 class, Peyton Bowen would have been dropped months before signing day. Just flat out would have been dropped. Because I think they've learned from those mistakes, and that's why you're seeing them have the success that they have now. And we have seen a decommitment from 27 class, but I don't think that was one that they were necessarily like. They liked Elson McGask, and they would have taken him, but when he started talking about wanting to take other visits, like, fine, go take other visits. We have other kids that we like as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an example of what we're talking about. They would have fought hard, like, no, you take visits or don't take visits. And then when he finally agreed to them, like, okay, cool, but we're still going to – no, this time they're like, hey, man, we love you. We'd love to have you, but you don't clearly want to do other things. Go do what you got to do, and we'll go find somebody else. Yeah, that's an example of what I'm talking about. I think they've learned from their mistakes, and that's why they've even raised it to a higher degree. What I'll say this, and I think Chief came around and said this, Sean, I think early on he absolutely met expectations that I had for him, that we had for him as recruiting. You're going out there and getting difference makers. You're going out there and building and recruiting to a level where you can say, this gives us a chance to compete for championships, right? Like, that's what they were doing. I think that meets expectations. I think what the 26 class did and what we're seeing in 27 is that's raising the bar. And that's how I would evaluate the job Marcus Freeman has done as a head football coach. Yeah. From a recruiting standpoint, and when I talk about recruiting, it's not just high school recruiting, is transfer portal recruiting. They're raising the bar of the quality of recruits they're bringing in from the portal. We went from Caleb Smith as the first receiver transfer to Bo Collins, Chris Mitchell, Jaden Harrison, then to Malachi, now to Quincy Porter and Mylan Graham. The last two classes, the caliber of receiver portal players has been way higher than it's been. We went from Javonte Jean-Baptiste, nice player. We went from R.J. Oben, nice player. Jared Dawson, I think, raised that bar a little bit. And now it's Francis Brew and Tion Gray. I think that's, what I mean? Like, we're seeing a raising of the bar. And even a guy like DJ McKinney, to me, is someone who, like, dude, that's a higher caliber of player than what you were bringing in before, even in the secondary. And so I think even in the transfer portal recruiting, we've seen Notre Dame raise the bar even greater than it was. And I think that's why I say he has exceeded expectations from a recruiting standpoint. Now it's about, can you continue that as you put a new staff together? But that's something that we'll evaluate down the road.
You mentioned something, and it made me, I literally was looking at this. I was going back in my phone and like kind of filtering out messages and making sure I had storage on my phone. And I came across this, and as soon as you mentioned Kari Adams, I was like, yo, I just looked at this message. This is his coach, Rich Holzer, from Loyola Blakefield, in the immediate aftermath of the announcement of his commitment. Very happy for him. I had a feeling he was going to pick Notre Dame for a while now. Now, yeah, he went on his officials, but he was just being nice. He went on that official at the Notre Dame to Maryland because they recruited him the most. But this is the rest of the quote. I think he's very relieved to have the process done. I think it's a great fit on both sides. So the messaging, I want to say that to say this. We cannot talk about the recruiting without talking about how important Marcus Freeman is from a character standpoint, and how much he contrasts the community outreach and how he interacts with professors, staff, people that are on the board. The energy that he creates makes Notre Dame want to work with him in recruiting as things shift and change with NIL rules, and actually wanting to be open and inviting to what he has to say or what he needs to make a class like 2026 and a transfer portal class in 2026 happen. You can't talk about recruiting without mentioning what he brings or what he adds that makes the community of Notre Dame feel like they are on one accord and want to operate and help each other. So now, things that we haven't seen, you just talked about it. Now Notre Dame is inviting to undergraduate transfers with 2 years of eligibility left. Maybe they would sneak one in every now and then, but now they're open to multiple. That comes from Marcus Freeman and the school wanting to help the program. And I think his character and how he operates has a lot to do with that. I think you have to throw that into the pot, right? So I think coming in, even though he wasn't landing the top 5 kids or keeping them in the class, he was still outdoing the previous 5 years at the beginning. And you have to understand it's Olympic time, right? I don't know if you watch ice skating, but there is something
I
called.
used to. I haven't watched Olympics.
Yeah, but Olympics, whether it's gymnastics or ice skating, there's something called a high level of difficulty, whatever you're going to perform, right? What you were asking or what he was being asked to do had a high level of difficulty. Coming in as a first-time head coach at a program like Notre Dame with national championship expectations every year. What he was being asked to do to change the culture, shift the culture, win games, build a team that can win a national championship on a consistent basis, and build it recruiting when the fan base and the culture was we can't recruit like Alabama, like Georgia, and like the other top schools. We can't do it. Well, if you look at it from that standpoint, with the high level of difficulty that he had, how can you say anything other than he met expectations? There's no way you can say he underachieved. At the least, you have to say he met expectations. And if you really look at it, you have to say, he overachieved with everything he's done to this point.
That I don't agree with. I don't agree that I'd say he's overachieved. I would say he's finally doing what a head coach at Notre Dame is supposed to do. And the best thing that Marcus Freeman has done, and this is in every aspect, this is something that'll bleed into the other topics, and we'll get into those next, because otherwise we're going to spend the next hour talking about the recruiting aspect of it. But what I actually thought this was going to be the short part, to be honest with you. It's my bad. It's my bad.
Ladies and gentlemen, we were talking about this via text, and I told him if we add anything else, this is going to be a 5-hour show. So let's keep it.
But the thing that I'll say is the greatest thing that Marcus Freeman brought to Notre Dame is a strong desire to dismantle all the excuses that the fan base had accepted for years. Now, that's not everybody, because we never accepted it. This is part of the reason that Brian Kelly hated my guts. This is part of the reason Brian Kelly used to have Brian Polian try to undermine me and talk trash about me and kind of ruin my reputation, because I would stand up and say, hey, this is bull crap. Stop making excuses. This is Notre Dame. Okay? You shouldn't be shopping down a different aisle at Notre Dame. That's because you don't want to put in the work. When we got Jalen McMillan telling, the offensive coordinator of Notre Dame, like, look, man, I love you guys. I'm really thinking hard about you, but right now I got the head coach, the OC, and the receivers coach at Washington telling me how much they want me, and I can't even get your head football coach on the phone. Guy was begging to have the head coach call him. He wouldn't do it. All right, it's the top 100 receiver that played for a championship at Washington. It's a 3rd-round draft pick. You don't think that, you know what I mean? So that, to me, is what he's done first and foremost, and that's what we saw in recruiting. Even that 23 class, and you had the big misses and, Peyton Bowen and Keon, but this is a class that added Charles Jagasol, Jeremiah Love, Boubacar Traore, Kenny Minchie, Cooper Flanagan, Armo Mukum, Christian Gray, Drake Bowen, Sullivan Absher, Jaden Alsbury, Jaden Greathouse, Adon Schuler, and then Jordan Faison as well. Again, that's a big-time class. And there's some other guys from that class that we're now expecting to kind of get an opportunity to help and perform for Notre Dame here moving forward. So Evan Absher, he's got a chance to win a starting job. Cooper Flanagan's a guy that we're expecting to do more. So I think in that regard, the greatest thing wasn't even just the results. It was why they had results. Because they were saying, hey, we're not afraid to go down to Texas for guys that Texas wants. We're not afraid to go out to California for guys USC wants. We're not afraid to go down to South and for guys that Alabama and Georgia wants. Matter of fact, those are exactly the kind of guys we do want. You know, who was the school that for a lot of people considered for a while the biggest competition for the two DNs that Notre Dame landed? Georgia. Right? Ebenezer was a teammate of Kenna Igboko who went to Georgia. Georgia liked him a lot. Rodney Dunham, they were on Rodney Dunham. You know, so you're going down, you're beating Bama in Oklahoma for a kid from Florida. They're no longer saying like, well, we're going to have to bow out of that one. You went down to Texas. Somebody just pointed this one out. You went down to Texas to get a kid from Texas whose dad played at Texas, who Texas wanted. They wouldn't even tried to get that Kadon Finley 5. They just said, oh, well, they'd have recruited him, and then as soon as you see Texas get involved, you're like, all right, well, we had a nice run. It was fun while it lasted. We're out. It's exact, and then we would have had people in the recruiting office and assistant coaches telling us, well, he didn't have the grades. You know how many times I heard that from every time Notre Dame would miss a kid, it was always, well, we had the grades. I was like, I said to a coach one time, I was like, dude, stop lying to me. I literally said this to a coach one time. Stop lying to me. Every time I said, you recruited this kid for a year and you just found out he had academic issues. A month ago, you were telling me you thought you were going to get him and you thought he was going to commit. And now when he's going somewhere else, you're telling me it's because of academic issues? Stop lying to people. That's why so many fans thought that they couldn't get kids into school, because every time they're going to miss on a kid, they'd go tell the media, had academic issues. He wasn't a fit. I'm like, you just now figured that out? As soon as he took an official visit to Florida, that's when you realize he wasn't a fit and academic issues. And how often do you hear that now about top recruits at Notre Dame? How often do you hear that a top recruit that Notre Dame misses on wasn't a good academic fit? Rarely. There's some, right? We talked about a kid from Indianapolis that a lot of people thought was going to come to Notre Dame. We're like, yeah, I don't know about that one, right? Why is that excuse not around as much anymore? Oh, Notre Dame's lowered their standards. Oh, they haven't. It's because most of the kids they lost weren't academic problems to begin with. That was the spin you were getting from BK and his minions about why they were getting their butts kicked on the recruiting trail. And they weren't going to say, I mean, you think Polian was going to call somebody and be like, hey, man, look, head coach wouldn't even call the kid. So, the reason, right? I mean, I was told that. Why? Because it was by new coaches that thought it was asinine that the head coach didn't work harder than he worked. They couldn't understand it. And so the issues that people use for so long aren't there anymore, not because Notre Dame changed their standards, but because they're actually putting in the work and doing the work, and you have a head coach that people actually want to play for. There's a former Power 4 offensive lineman that was a top recruit coming out, and I was talking to him recently, and he goes, I so wanted to go to Notre Dame. He goes, but I just couldn't see myself playing for Brian Kelly. He literally told me that. So, man, it's not the first time I've heard that. Not the first time I've heard that. So that's kind of where I'm at, Sean. So I think he certainly, at the very least, has met expectations. And expectations, by the way, people, are not, are you doing as well or better than what Brian Kelly did or what Charlie Weiss did? It's about, to win a championship, this is the level you have to be at. And I think the one area that I would say I have no concern about what Notre Dame is doing is, are they building the roster in a way that says, depth-wise across the board, do they have the talent to compete with anybody and beat anybody without having to say if 12 times? Notre Dame could have beat Bama in 2010 or 2020 if this, if that, if this, if that. I mean, you'd have got to about 27 ifs, but if all those ifs went right, they could have pulled off that upset. Now it's like you're doing it on the other. Yeah, they're going to beat this team unless, this doesn't go right. That, you know what I mean? It's like, it's completely changed the expectation. And so I think those are things that that I look at. Now, listen, sometimes somebody just said, agree with you, Brian, but I do think Holtz, Davey, and Willingham made the academic excuses too. I never said they didn't, first of all. But do you know who else never made excuses? Charlie Weiss. Never used academics as an excuse. Having said that, there was a time when that was a legitimate excuse. Like later in Holtz's tenure and early in Bob Davies' tenure, Notre Dame as an institution was trying to make life tougher for the football program. There's no question about it. That was not the case from Charlie Weiss on. Was not the case. It was never the case during Brian Kelly's tenure, ever. And so, I mean, they let T. Shepard in as an early enrollee. Like, they bent over backwards to get certain guys into school. Trust me, there were some big-time recruits early in Kelly's tenure that they probably couldn't even get in now. So I just want to point that out. Sometimes it was a legitimate excuse. I think Bob Davie was dealt a pretty rough hand. I don't feel bad for him because I think what Bob Davie said and did to get the job is not something I find overly endearing. But he also was given a tough job. I mean, September schedules were brutal. They weren't letting him get kids in school. And he wasn't competent to coach at a place like Notre Dame. You know, late in Lou's tenure, they were doing things. They were trying to, you know, get rid of the Vinny Serrato stench in their view of how they recruited in the successful kids they brought in. They didn't like the football had become too big. But the administration at Notre Dame now is not the administration from 1995, 96. It's all new people. So it's irrelevant to compare what they went through to now. And I'm just sitting there telling you, and I said this for Brian Kelly's entire tenure, Notre Dame is not the thing holding Brian Kelly back. There are areas where the school needs to do better, no question. But it's kind of like this, Sean. If you're not even willing to do this, why are you asking us to do this? Like you're trying to put this all on us. And that's where I have a big issue with what we saw. So it's not about did you do better than Brian Kelly? It's are you doing it at a level that's going to allow you to be for a champion? Let's go to this next one, Sean, and let's talk about hiring coaches. Has Marcus Freeman met expectations on the whole when it comes to putting a staff together? And I think now's the perfect time to have this conversation because he just went through an offseason where he had to make a lot of very important changes. You know, and really 2 years in a row, they've had to make some really important changes to coaches who left. So let's evaluate that one. Sean, first of all, I'll let you start. What's your take?
Well, once again, you know, you can't have this discussion without really looking at the level of difficulty. He comes in, and I think this goes to, you can have a plan that you think is going to serve you well as Marcus Freeman well. And I think that's what Jack Swarbrick did when, you know, we saw the structure where he tried to surround. I think he tried to insulate and surround Marcus Freeman with some things that would make the transition a little bit better. And ultimately, moving forward, things didn't work out probably as he thought it would. So you really can't, you know what? That's a blemish. The wide receiver coach, his initial wide receiver coach, you can see that as a blemish. But for the most part, his coaching hires, defensively, I think he has, hit the majority of things out of the park defensively for the most part. Offensively,
let me stay on that for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chris Ash is to be determined.
Right.
Is there another defensive hire he's made that you would question at all?
I think initially, not the actual coach, but maybe the position they were coaching initially. There were some questions, but I don't think there's anything that I can step back and definitively say, oh, that's a bad hire.
Who would that be? I'm just curious.
Well, that's Al Washington. Well, you know, he played at Boston College, but I thought he did a decent job recruiting linebacker at Ohio State.
Yeah, they had just signed the number one linebacker class in the country. Now they were all Ohio kids.
I had questions about him switching from linebacker coach to defensive.
That's
line
fair.
coach.
And he'd coached at BC and Cincinnati and all that. Yeah.
Yes.
But I think that turned out to be a good hire.
Yeah.
That's a fair one. That's a fair one.
Outside of that,
I'm with you. I think he's made strong hires on defense for sure.
Yeah.
Offensively, Sean, let's talk about that one.
Offensively, you can question. I really don't count Tommy as his hire. If you want to count Tommy,
Tommy was hired before Marcus was hired. Yeah. So I don't, Now I think he would have hired Tommy Rees anyway.
Probably.
I do. I'm confident.
If he was smart, he would have known this is a good way to help my transition and help the offense keep some continuity.
I think he also respected Tommy's football knowledge. Everyone that knows Tommy Rees respects his football knowledge. The only people that don't are fans. Now, you may say he's not a great offensive coordinator, and that's different. Then there's really smart football coaches that aren't necessarily great head coaches or great coordinators.
Yeah.
So I think that would be one. This is actually a decent one. Salty said perhaps James Laurinaitis only to see him scoot off to with Pierce, Ohio State right quick. Actually, I think that hire made a lot of sense because I don't believe James Laurinaitis he wasn't a full-time coach.
Right.
He was sort of like an GA type of thing. But yeah, even that one's like that made a lot of sense, dude. It's a former teammate, former, high draft pick. So that made a lot of sense. So keep going with the offensive one.
But off Jared Parker, it's like, even when initially it was like, I don't know about this one. But honestly, I think it's fair to criticize some of his Chancey Stuckey. It's fair to criticize that one.
Mm-hmm.
I understand how those things happen. I think they lost out on a certain wide receiver coach because of certain things that, no need to get into that. But it's fair. The two names that I mentioned, it's fair to bring those up. It's just fair to bring the offensive side of the ball up because I think for a while early on in his tenure, it was a blind spot for him. But
I would question maybe it still is.
It's fair. Yet to be determined, right?
Yeah.
Whether or not that's been answered. But I think I really understand why. Because if you're going to go into a situation, you're going to lean on your strength. And that's not me, absolving his poor decisions. But I understand as a defensive guy and coming from the structure he came from, under the head coach he came from at Ohio State, was probably like in his book, that book he kept all the time of the things he's going to do, he had a plan for how he was going to build his program, right? And so he probably hired coaches along those plans. But just like any good person or wise person, you're open to change and you're able to recognize your own stench. Like, you don't let other people tell you, like, hey, bro, you need to put some deodorant on. Nah. And Marcus Freeman has shown the ability, in my opinion, to say, man, I need to go freshen up a bit. Or
sadly, that's not true. There are people that need to be told, bro, you need more aluminum in your deodorant.
Facts. But no, and that doesn't mean he solved everything and he still doesn't have blind spots. But I think whether it's from recruiting, staff, he has shown the ability to be open to saying, man, I need to change this. I need to be more open to this. I think going from Jared Parker to Mike Denbrock was like, yo, let me get someone there's a little bit more experience and someone I can really trust to say, take this offense and build it. And Mike Denbrock comes in, the first thing he says, we have a top 5 defense. We want to match that with a top 5 offense. He set the expectation. So that is the expectation. And so I think from a coaching standpoint, he has met expectations overall. I'll say he's met expectations because they've had just 2 years ago, we were talking about this staff being maybe the best coaching staff in college football.
Correct.
And being elite, right? And so he put that together.
Right.
So I would have to say he met expectations, but there are definitely some blemishes on the offensive side of the ball. Without question.
On defense, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And I think this year solidified that. I mean, look, let's be honest. This was the first year he had to make a bunch of really tough decisions on defense, right? I mean, he walked into the situation and Mike Mickens was already here. And, Al Washington was the guy he'd worked with. Like, that hire made some sense. Mike Elson had left. The Al Golden hire was a questionable one, but it made a lot of sense. The questionable aspect of that hire was simply this guy had not called a play in 20 years, but we loved his football mind, and it turned out to be a good hire. Chris Ash is TBD. I think the start of last year was not good. The last 8 games of last year was exceptional. Now it's what does he do in year 2? But when you lose Washington, Bulla, and Mickens in one offseason, then, how do you replace that? It's going to tell us a lot about who you are. And I don't know that you could have done much better than he did. Honestly. I mean, you got a current Big Ten D coordinator who just come be your DB coach and pass game coordinator. They can put co-D coordinator on his title all they want. He's the pass game coordinator. You went out and got a former head football coach and one of the best D-line coaches in the business to come coach your D-line, and you went out and got a linebacker coach that's very well respected for that role. And 2 of them one had a very strong connection with Chris Ash. That was Charlie Partridge. The other one only coached under Chris Ash for a year. And then the third had no connection to Chris Ash. And so what I have been told from different people I've talked to is that Freeman consulted Chris Ash, put value on Chris Ash had to say, but he made the hires he wanted to make in this cycle. He wasn't going to repeat the mistake he made, because that's part of growing as a head football coach is, yes, you made the mistakes you made offensively, which I'll get to, but you've got to show that you've grown. And I think the way he put this defensive staff together this year, Sean, while taking Ash's counsel, but at the end of the day, I'm going to hire who I want to hire, showed evolution of Marcus Freeman, and I think he put together a strong defensive class. I think this offseason taught us a lot about defense, where before it's kind of like, okay, we've seen some good things, but, the evaluation of Max Bulla, the way that he did, I mean, there's just a lot to me that shows that he's done a good job there with the defense. That answered a lot of questions for me, Sean. A lot of questions. Because, yeah, you did a good job of that initial staff. I think you hit some home runs. Maybe you got a little bit, not lucky, but could you have really seen Al Golden being as good as he did? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But now I think you've repeated it, and that's where it tells me you've done something. When you could do it again, hey, we got to remake the staff again. Here's what we're going to go do, and he went out and nailed it. I think that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I think even to expand upon that, the support staff, Sean Sivers and Jones, hiring those guys, which people are like, yo, that came out of nowhere, but it's going to pay really big dividends. Recruiting wise, I've shared with you, there are like 6 linebackers that Brian John Mary was recruiting, that he was recruiting Ellis McGaskin when he committed to Notre Dame. So there was a big transition where it's like, okay,
so what you're saying is he can't beat the top schools for players that he wants. I see how it is. Okay, I see what you're saying.
No, but we have seen linebackers that Notre Dame probably might not have been at the top of their list. They hired John Mary, and all of a sudden Notre Dame's in their top 6 schools, right? And it's like, that's the benefit. I put a post up on the board, like all of the Chicago kids and all the Midwest kids that Aaron Henry was in on, have been recruiting, has a relationship with, and how that's going to benefit Notre Dame and what is the 27 and 28 classes in the state of Illinois, especially on the defensive side of the ball, it's going to be a huge asset. So I think from a recruiting standpoint, the hires even made more sense. I know it was more to the process than that. But, just that aspect of it was like, yo, this is really going to be beneficial
100%.
with these existing relationships that are crossing over now to the Notre Dame side.
And it is smart to bring in coaches that have some familiarity with your defensive coordinator. Because, you can in one breath say, gee, I'm really worried about this new staff coming together. And then in the next breath be like, I can't believe you brought in guys that worked for Chris Ash. Well, aren't guys that worked for Chris Ash going to have the easiest transition on how to coach under Chris Ash? What are you talking about right now? You know what I mean? But it's got to be still, you have to make those hires. You can't put this on Chris Ash. That was the big mistake he made on offense at the very beginning. He was kind of giving Tommy Rees. I don't mean that like other people do. That's just the fact. Rees was going to be the OC whether Freeman wanted him or not. What I have also always said is he would have hired Tommy Rees no matter what. And that's the mistake I think Jack Swarbrick made. Jack Swarbrick should have said, hey, look, Marcus, you need to do this. If this is who you want, then we'll make this move. I thought the way that Jack Swarbrick was like, no, I'm keeping Tommy, I think sort of undercut Marcus Freeman a little bit, at the very least from a perception standpoint. But then I also think Marcus Freeman made some mistakes early on by deferring too much to his coordinator. And the biggest mistake Marcus Freeman has made as a coach, in my opinion, has been he coaches his coaches the way he wanted to be coached, which is, I know what I'm doing. Let me do my job. The problem is not everybody is you. Not everybody is going to be as accountable. And that's why you saw the Chancey Stuckey situation. That's why you saw other situations where he's had to step in and say, this isn't okay. You've got to be more on top of your coaches. And until they prove to you that they're capable of doing it at Notre Dame, you've got to make sure that they understand the standard that goes into coaching at Notre Dame, how to treat young people, how to interact with the community, the type of players that you're going to recruit to Notre Dame. You don't wait till there's a problem to deal with it. And I think that was the one mistake he made, which is honestly the most understandable mistake to make since he'd never been a head coach before. Where I give him credit is he quickly realized that Chancey Stuckey was not a fit and moved on from him, and did so in a way where it was very obvious that he wasn't happy with Chancey Stuckey. They fired him before the bowl game, and that was one of the most short and emotionless, he's no longer here things that you'll ever see from Notre Dame. You know what I mean? There was no thanks for all your, it was, he's no longer with us. Peace out. And the Jared Parker situation, actually, I don't fault him for. He's not the reason they didn't get Andy Ludwig. Freeman's not the reason they didn't get Andy Ludwig. I think Andy Ludwig would have been a very strong hire. They did not get him because of him. That's just the fact. Where I look at it and say, you were kind of backed into a corner the minute the Andy Ludwig thing fell through. And it made sense to go with a guy like Jared Parker, who you trusted, who was probably going to be the OC at some point in time down the road anyway. And he realized, I think, during the 23 season that Jared's a good football coach, but Jared's not the kind of elite football coach we need. And when you look at that, and people say, well, Jared Parker's a bad coach. That's nonsense, in my opinion. There's a difference between not good and not good enough. It's how I feel about Jared Parker. I mean, about Joe Rudolph. Anybody says Joe Rudolph's a bad football coach just doesn't know what they're looking at, in my opinion. That's not the debate. The debate is he good enough for that position at a place like Notre Dame? That's the debate. Same thing with Jared Parker. I mean, Notre Dame, Sean, set a modern record in scoring that was only broken 2 years later by Mike Denbrock, but that 39 points per game in 2023 was a school record, modern record, meaning post-World War II. The problem was they accumulated that success against bad teams and then didn't play well against the good teams. They scored 42 on Navy, 56 on Tennessee State, 45 on NC State, 41 on Central Michigan, 48 on USC, 58 on Pitt, 45 on Wake, 56 on Stanford, 40 on Oregon State. They only scored 14 against Ohio State. They only scored 21 on Duke. They only scored 20 on Louisville. 7 of those came with the game no longer in question. You were out of the game. And then you only scored 23 against Clemson in the game, Sean, where you had 7-8 possessions in the second half with a chance to tie the game. And you couldn't do it. And the only score you had in the second half was made because Xavier Watts picked off a pass and ran it back to the 1 yard line. That was the only touchdown you got, I believe, in the second half. It was those big moments that made Marcus Freeman realize, look, Jared's a good football coach, but I just don't know that he's this level of football coach. And then when Jared got the job, I think that was a perfect time. And that's when he went out and got Mike Denbrock, which was an absolute home run hire. So I think in that regard, you lose Dylan McCullough, you go out and get Jaywan Sider. success. I think Mike Brown's a good football coach. I think Gino Guidugli's a good football coach. I think Joe Rudolph's a good football coach. The question that I have right now is this season is going to tell us ultimately where Marcus Freeman is as a hirer of coaches. I think so far I'd say he's met expectations. Now, he did not early on. The process early on was a train wreck, in my opinion. But I think he learned quickly. And the more recent hires have been strong. You lose Dylan McCullough last year, you replace him with Jaywan Sider. You lose Al Golden, you replace him with Chris Ash. And then obviously you lose Al Washington, Max Bullitt, and Mike Mickens. You lost 5 really good football coaches in 2 years. And I think you've replaced them with 1 question mark, 4 really good football coaches. Not a lot of people do that. I think this year is going to tell us a lot about Marcus Freeman as a hirer of coaches. And that is Joe Rudolph, Mike Brown, Gino Guidugli all proved to be big-time coaches, championship caliber coaches, and Chris Ash proves himself to be a championship caliber D coordinator. So that is one where I say, so far I'd say he's met expectations. To say that he's succeeded this year is going to tell us that a lot about that, because what does Joe Rudolph do? And it really comes down to 2 people. It comes down to Joe Rudolph and Chris Ash. If they are the coaches Marcus Freeman thinks he is, because if I were to have a criticism, I'd say, I don't think he puts as much, I don't think the bar is as high for what makes him happy on offense as it is on defense. On defense, he knows exactly if you're not living up to what I want. And you see him get involved when he needs to. We're going to fix this. We're going to fix this. On offense, I don't know that because he said, I'm not an offensive guy. I don't know that he watches the offensive line and says, hey, I have a strong feeling on this. I think he looks at the end result. And I think he's more willing to use injuries as a justification for being okay with the O-line play in a way that I don't think he would on the D-line. You know what I mean? And because like we saw the D-line have injuries and exceed and to me outplay the offense 2 years ago. And I think that's where I'm at. So and somebody asked about hiring Denbrock was an absolute grand slam home run. How about never winning a championship? You're part of the puzzle. Have you had offenses have you had on your side of the ball championship football teams? If you put the 2023 LSU offense or the 2015 Notre Dame offense or the 2025 Notre Dame offense on a whole lot of teams over the years, you're winning a championship. You can't tell me that a coach, somebody can give me this, well, he's never won a championship. You're going to tell me that if you put the 23 offense for LSU on the 23 Notre Dame team with the defense Notre Dame at 23, you're telling me that team doesn't win a championship? If Notre Dame in 2012 doesn't have the 2023 LSU offense, do they win a championship? 2015, the Notre Dame offense he had, you give him the 2017, the 2018, the 2020, the 2022 defenses or 24 defenses, you're telling me they don't win a championship in 15? Like literally the number 1 and number 2 yards per play averages in Notre Dame history are both coordinated by Mike Denbrock. So your offense is not you didn't lose to Texas A&M last year because of your offense. So no, I'm sorry. Denbrock is absolutely a great coach. It's a great hire. And I think anybody that says otherwise is to me just very misguided. And I still, you're never going to make everybody happy. I just find it hilarious that there are still people that question Mike Denbrock as an offensive coordinator. Like this guy is either the luckiest guy on the planet who just keeps walking into the perfect situations, or maybe he's really freaking good. Notre Dame was a joke on offense until Mike Denbrock was hired as the offensive coordinator in 2014. Then they set program records in 2015. And then he leaves and they're solid, but they don't take off again until what? Till he comes back. He goes to Cincinnati and helps build them into a team that's putting a bunch of guys in the NFL, 3rd-round draft pick at quarterback, All 3 starting receivers get drafted. Both tight ends get drafted. Running back gets drafted. Then he goes to LSU and he builds the second greatest offense in that school's history. And the only reason it wasn't the best offense in school history is because the 2019 offense might have been the best offense in the history of college football. Builds a Heisman winner, comes to Notre Dame. In year 1, they go play for the title. In year 2, he has the most points scored at Notre Dame since like 1912. And we're going to act like he's a question mark? So either he's the luckiest guy in the planet who just keeps lucking into successful job over and over again in spite of him, or maybe he's the reason that all these offenses have been legit. He's been an offensive coordinator 4 times. At one school, they set a program record in yards per play. And I think 8 starters on offense get drafted. Second job he had, they went to college football playoffs as a G5 team before the G5 got automatic bids. Beat Notre Dame at Notre Dame. Third job, they set a bunch of school records. Coach is a Heisman Trophy winner in his second year. Fourth job, they go to the national championship game in year 1, and in year 2 set a mess of program records, some of which are records he broke of his own records. And we're going to question if the offensive coordinator hire was the strong hire. Like, really? That's the least of Notre Dame's problems in 2026. Is Mike Denbrock. I think that was one of the best hires he made. And you know what I liked about it too, Sean, is you hired someone that's going to have your back, that's going to be loyal to you, that came here for one reason, 2 reasons. Reason number 1, Mike Denbrock came back, is because Mike Denbrock loves Notre Dame. Like, there's no question about that. Mike Denbrock loves Notre Dame. Number 2, Mike Denbrock respects the heck out of Marcus Freeman. I think that is something that was also smart. You needed someone that was going to have your back and not be here to try to undermine you, and which a lot of big name coordinators might do. And I think that's one thing that is good for him is at the 2 coordinator spots. Say whatever you want about Chris Ash. Chris Ash isn't here to undermine Marcus Freeman and try to take his job. That's not him. That's not what he's doing here. So I think overall, he's done a good job hiring. This year is going to be the ultimate test, Sean. How well do they do this season? That's going to tell us everything we need to know about, has he met or exceeded expectations for building a staff that can win a championship. That's where I'm at. That's absolutely where I'm at. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. So, Sean, last part of this conversation is, how has Marcus Freeman performed when it comes to, is the team maximizing their potential? And this one, I think, might be the most controversial take that we've had yet.
One thing I would never do is to say, expectations in Notre Dame are not national championship, right? And for a long time, you take a step back and say, are those expectations as time moved forward from Lou Holtz, were those expectations realistic, right? It's one thing to have those expectations, but were they realistic? Notre Dame went from being in an advantageous situation as far as national viewership, revenue from TV, the landscape changed, the money changed, and Notre Dame was kind of like a beacon in those particular areas, or a forerunner. And then all of a sudden it felt like they were a little bit behind. And so even when the landscape changed in recruiting, NIL and everything, you kind of had that feeling that Notre Dame needed to play a little bit of catch up. And so as we sit here today, knowing that those are the things that have transpired, but the expectation of a national championship amongst the fan base has really never changed. It's like the expectation is the expectation, right? And so Marcus Freeman, knowing that and coming in, look, 43-12, 38-10 in the regular season, 5-2 in bowl games, 14-5 against ranked opponents. I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But once again, I just want to throw in level of difficulty. As a first-time head coach that's never been a head coach, and to do it at a place like Notre Dame where the expectation is the expectation, like I said, on that resume of coaching, he has some blind spots, right? Some things that need to get to elite level. I think we've seen the defensive side of the ball get to a championship level, and now we're waiting for the offensive side of the ball to kind of meet that so they can go ahead and lift the trophy. And that's an expectation for this team. It was an expectation for that roster last year. And unfortunately, they just weren't able to get the opportunity to do it in the playoff. And now it's even heightened more, in my opinion, for this 2026 team. So as a coach, I do think Marcus Freeman has met expectations. I think there are losses. Marshall at home, Stanford at home, Northern Illinois at home. Those are losses that I would be the first to say are like unforgivable losses as a head coach at Notre Dame. Like you can't have those home losses on your resume, right? But then he counters that with beating Clemson at home. And then the next year, we get upset because they're trending after kind of like stumbling in the middle of the season. And we think they're really building to having 10 wins. And here's the loss at Clemson, with Clemson missing like 9 starters, right? So it's just some of those losses that I can see people thinking that he has maybe slightly underachieved as a head coach, because you think that losses like that shouldn't exist at Notre Dame. But I think, once again, he's able to smell himself, and he's able to realize like that cannot happen. And if you look at what they did after the first 2 losses to playoff teams last year, they outside of the Boston College game, which even watching that game, I've watched it a couple of times. You know, even after they played, there was never a time. It's easy to say it after you watch it because you're so frustrated with the way the game's going. But the truth of the matter is, you really didn't think Notre Dame was going to lose that game. You just didn't. We just didn't like the way it was going, and we didn't like that it was close. And that's just the truth of the matter. And I think that's a feeling that comes when you instill a certain confidence even in the fan base, that even when it's a closer game, there's a frustration like, why is this close? We should be killing these guys. And that comes a long way from the frustration of Marshall, the frustration of Stanford, and some of those earlier losses, right? So I think there are certain hurdles early in his coaching, on his coaching resume, that definitely would lead to someone saying he may be underachieved a little bit. When you take a big picture, look at him as a coach, and some of the things we pointed out in the previous 2 conversations, or the previous 2 parts, I think he's met expectations as a coach. I honestly don't even know what the expectation of him as a coach was. Did we really have an expectation?
Well, it's not. I mean, I would hope so, because that was the whole premise of this show, was asking whether or not he lived up to expectations.
I think the expectation was a moving target
for this particular. The first 2, it was very black or white. For this one, I think you're spot on. So when you say that, Sean, it makes total sense. I was like, hold on a second. This show is your idea. What do you mean we didn't have an expectation?
The expectation is there's an expectation at Notre Dame. There's an expectation at Notre Dame. I think it's fair to say we expected him to come in. I expected him to have a lot more charisma and personality, and to be more effective in recruiting. I expected that off the bat, right? I expected the players to play hard for him. But I also expected there to be a learning curve. If I was going to be honest with myself, I knew, man, it's going to be a learning curve as a head coach, and he has to do it at Notre Dame. So I don't think I particularly expected the Northern Illinois loss and the Stanford loss.
I think that's the thing.
The Marshall loss was more understandable to me because of the high of the game before, right? and then
The
not having
Marshall
the
one I
experience.
understood.
Yeah, not understanding as a head coach how to get your team ready. Like that's
that was
coming
my
off that
trap
Ohio
game.
State game.
Off season, we talked about that. That was my trap game. Because number one, Marshall's a good football team. And I did worry about that. I think the Stanford game is one. I think the way they lost to Louisville in 2023, the way they lost Ohio State, not that they lost, but that they lost with back-to-back plays of only having 10 guys on the field, stuff like that. The Clemson loss in 23 where they just didn't look like they really wanted to be there. The Northern Illinois loss, to me, those things are in the rear view for me now. And that's why this is an interesting one. It's a hard one to answer, Sean, because I'm curious what people think. I want to hear your guys' opinion. Andrew, Chief, all of you guys. I want to hear your opinion of what I'm about to say. When you ask me this question, Sean, from a big picture standpoint, without getting into the context of let's go season by season, has he met expectations? I say, yes, I think he's absolutely met expectations at Notre Dame. Now it's about the expectations to me for what the expectations were kind of each year. But going into 2026, I think that the expectations are way higher. But here's the counter to that, Sean. It's if you were to go season by season, I would argue they've only actually met expectations for what that team should have been in one season. And here's what I mean by that. 2022, that team did not meet expectations, but it was really off by one game. If you change the Stanford game, then I think that team lived up to the expectations for what that team should have been. Some could argue that, if you lose to Clemson and beat Stanford, we look at that season differently. I don't agree. I think they should have beat Clemson at home. You're Notre Dame. You should beat people at home. 2023, I think that team underachieved. And there's a lot of reasons why. They should not have lost to Ohio State at home. I don't mind losing to Louisville at Louisville. That was a really good Louisville team. They played for the ACC championship that year. It's the way you lost that was the issue. The way you lost, like losing at Clemson, even that Clemson team, there's no shame in that. But it's more so the way you lost. So I feel like if you just would have beat one of those teams, I'd say you live up to expectations. 24, you absolutely lived up to expectations. Yes, the Northern Illinois game sucked, but that team went on a 13-game win streak and played for the title. I would argue that the 2025 team did not meet expectations based on how good this team should have been in that they should have played for a title. But this year is the most challenging year to make that assessment. And here's why I say that. Big picture, no context, this team should have been in the playoffs. They should have been at least a semifinal team. Flat out, how they should have been. No excuses. You lost to those two teams. That's on you as a head football coach. That's on you as a football team. That's one side of the coin. However, I then look at the last 8 games and say, for the last 8 to 9 games of the season, you were the best team in college football, in my opinion. Arguably the second. You want to argue Indiana was better? Fine. We only have one data point of the two teams playing. Notre Dame and Indiana both played in Hard Rock against Miami, and Miami won. Indiana won, Notre Dame lost. So I'll give you that. But at worst, they were the second best team in the country for the last 2 months of the season, in my opinion. It's like, okay, so in one breath, in the end result, you didn't live up to expectations. But when I look at how good that team was for most of the season, even the bad game in week 3 or game 3, they won by 26. We were mad that it was only a 12-point game at halftime, as opposed to it should have looked a lot more like the Syracuse and Stanford games. We're mad at this team because they let teams score garbage touchdowns. That's what think about this. The last 2 months of the season, what was the biggest beef we had with Notre Dame football? Why are you giving up these fourth quarter touchdowns with your backups? That was the only thing you can complain about for the last 2 months of the season. So by the end of the year, they lived up to what they should have been the last 2 months of the season. The frustration is that you didn't get a chance to play for a championship because you weren't ready the first 2 games. So this is a weird year. And then when I look at 2024, here's where I'm going to say this one. And Andrew Gilmore just kind of took a little bit of what I was going to say, Sean. They certainly met expectations, but here's what I'll say to you. I would argue they exceeded expectations. I thought Notre Dame had a chance to play for championship in 2024, as did you. Agree? Going into that season, Notre Dame, this team has a chance to play for championship. We both liked Riley Leonard a lot.
You convinced me.
Yes.
Because you were the one that told me how the staff felt.
Right.
And I was like, really?
Right.
And then after hearing that, yeah, I got to the point where you were.
Right. And they did. Having said that, the expectation going into the season was when you look at a team that's going to have Charles Jagasaw in the starting lineup, that's going to have Billy Schrouth and Ashton Craig, who were excellent together in the last 3 games of the season in 2023 when they had to start. Boubacar's ready for a breakout. Jordan Patelho is, the way he, we're hoping he can finally step up. We weren't sure about him, but we're hoping he can step up. You got Howard Cross coming off an All-American season. You've got Josh Burnham ready to step into a key role. We were very high on Josh Burnham. Drake's taken over as your starting linebacker. You're excited about that. Xavier Watts decided to come back, right? Like Benjamin Morrison's going to be a stud. If I'd have told you before the year they're not going to have Jagasaw up until the second half of the semifinal game, they're going to lose Botelho in game 3, lose Ashton Craig in game 3, lose Boubacar in game 5, lose Benjamin Morrison and Jason Onye in game 6 for the season, and then Riley Mills is going to be an All-American and then get hurt in the first game of the playoffs and not play the rest of the playoffs. That team is going to go play for a championship. You just said, no way. Because the team we thought was going to play for a championship that year is not the team we got. We didn't get that version of Notre Dame. We didn't get Jagasaw and Ashton Craig together for 16 games. We didn't get to see what a Notre Dame D-line with Boubacar and Riley Mills and Jason Onye and Jordan Patelho with Benjamin Morrison at corner would have done against Ohio State. We never got to see that. So for that team to go through what they went through and still make it to the championship game, I would argue they overachieved based on what the team was, even though they accomplished what we thought they were capable of accomplishing. Because who was the one team we weren't sure if they could beat in 2024? It's Ohio State. So then you look at 25 and you say, okay, maybe they slightly underachieved, but that team played at an elite level for a long period of time. I would actually argue that if you look at just the overall balance of the last 2 years, I would say this: Notre Dame has emerged as one of the top 5 teams in college football the last 2 years. So without the context of what they should or shouldn't have done this season, I'd say in that regard, I think he's met expectations. It was a bit of a winding road to get there, but that's where they are when it comes to that. Now, we'll talk about 2026 here in a minute, Sean, but thoughts on that? I'm curious what you guys think about that. I actually think they ended up overachieving in 2024, and even though the end result of 25 was an underachievement from the end result, it's hard for me to really be there completely when I look at how well that team played and how good the 2 teams they lost to were. I mean, those are 2 playoff teams, and you should have really beat both of them.
Yeah, I think you just kind of just laid it out. I think year by year, it's a great conversation. I love the way you broke that down and laid it out for everyone. But as I said, when I was talking, leading into your conversation, I totally understand where people can take the bits and pieces and come to a conclusion that he's underachieved. I totally get it. But if you're going to be objective and add in, as I said before, which I think a lot of people think it's just easy to be a head coach in football. I think yeah. And then to do it at Notre Dame. Oh, yeah, it's easy. No, it's not. And not consistently be successful and build and be able to manage. Has he made mistakes? Absolutely. We pointed out the mistakes in recruiting. We pointed out the mistakes with the staff. And we touched on the mistakes as a head coach. But even with that, as you said, Notre Dame is viewed as a top 5 program right now. That's with him as the helm. Marcus Freeman is viewed as a top 5 head coach in college football by a lot of people. So for him to get to that point and be viewed that way, and for the program to be viewed that way, I find it hard to take a step back and say he hasn't met expectations, right? If you want to go year by year, break it down, like I said, I understand.
Right, like that's what makes it tough, because when you take the entire tenure into consideration, it's impossible to say he's underachieved. But the interesting thing is, but when you do go year by year, you can make a case that 3 of the 4 teams were not as good as they should have been.
Absolutely. But I think
at least when it comes to the end result, I still say the last 2 months of this team was way better the last 2 months of 25 than they were ever for that long of a period of time in 2024.
Yeah.
Like the October Notre Dame team in 2025 whoops the October Notre Dame team of 2024, in my opinion. They beat them by like Ohio State would have. Honestly, I truly believe that.
Is there anyone, because I think you pointed out, I think you said the 2020 team, all the ifs, and I think that's a great point you made, right? Notre Dame beats Alabama if this, if that, if this, and it probably gets down to about 10 things, 10 ifs. There isn't one team by December of 2025. You line Notre Dame up against anybody in the playoffs, and there is no ifs. Just kick the ball off. Most Notre Dame fans would say, no, Indiana, Miami, if we play Miami again, please put us on the field with Miami again. Most Notre Dame fans would have said, no, we just need to play. We just need to play our game. We just need to play the way we play, which goes to one of the constants. His teams get better every year. As the season goes on, by the time they get to December, they're a much better version than August. That's been consistent. Regardless of whether or not you want to say they underachieved, by the time they got to the end of the season, his teams get better. And so I think that bodes well for now, if you can start off well, because that has been one of the things that needs to be answered as a head coach. Why have you failed to have your team ready to go at the beginning of seasons? It harmed you last year and stopped you from getting into the playoff. You have an easier schedule to help you facilitate that this year, but the way you play in that game is still going to matter. It's still something that people, fans, media should be watching. It's not good enough for them to come out against Wisconsin and win a 10-point game. This team is better than Wisconsin by 10 points, just in principle and in talent.
Way better, yeah.
Way better. Now, come out and show us. Prove it to yourself as a program that we have answered the bell and we have answered that question, that we can start a season the way an elite team should start a season. And now build from that plateau and that floor rather than building from a lower floor to get to the point where now we're one of the best teams in the country when it's time to go into the playoffs. That is something that I think he definitely needs to answer as a head coach, right? We've seen him be able to get his team ready to go and respond from those. Those are difficult situations. Losing to Marshall at home, losing to Stanford. He shows that he can get his team to respond, refocus, and continue to push forward. So there are a lot of positive things. When you look at this, there's a lot of positive things, factual. There's a lot of blemishes, factual, concerning his tenure as a head coach in Notre Dame. But I just think big picture, you take a step back, you say, yeah, you met expectations. I think someone in the chat said if you expected Marcus Freeman to win 10 games every year, then you're a little bit over your skis.
Mm-hmm.
You're a little bit over your skis. And I think you misrepresent what it is to be a head coach at a place like Notre Dame.
Say that again, Sean. Well, if you do
No,
what?
someone in the chat said their expectation was he was going to win 10 games every year. And I'm like, maybe that was your expectation. I didn't expect him to win 10 games. Not every year.
I did because, and I still say this, Sean, if they would have beat a 3-9 Stanford team at home in 2022, they would have won 10 games every year.
Yeah, but
now, I don't know if I'd say 10 games in the regular season. No.
But they did. No. I thought he was talking regular season. I'm thinking they're talking regular season.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's fair. And that's why I'd say that you could argue that he underachieved the first 2 years relative to what the expectation is at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I think some of the things that you like I said, I can live with the Marshall loss if you don't give us Stanford. I can live with the Ohio State loss if you don't give us Louisville. Like that's where I'm at. You know what I mean? Like that's where I say is like, but to your point, and we'll move on to part 2 here in a second, because I want to get to 2026. My thing is, are you trending in the right direction? And even though we could kind of look at how the 25 season finished and say that team didn't live up to expectations because it happened in week 1 and 2, even then, as we said, I still think you have to look at the trajectory of the program as quite good.
Yeah.
Because we would say, and we're not, it's not just us saying this. National people were saying that. You did not want to face this Notre Dame team in the playoffs. So, yeah, what that shows is there's still things that Marcus Freeman has to figure out. But I think when you look at year 4 compared to year 1, the list of things he has to figure out is like, before it was like, okay, here's all the things that Marcus Freeman has to figure out as a head coach. It's all of this. Now it's like this. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that's where we're at.
Yeah. And the reason I say that is I think Alabama didn't hire Nick Saban other than to win a national championship.
Sure.
That's why they hired him. Did they think that 7-6 season with that terrible home loss was going to happen? Did they envision that? It happened, but do you really think they thought that was going to take place? So it's like, that's what happens, especially when you're changing a culture. No, any wise people know I'm going to have to hold fast during some tough times, but my expectation is we're going to get to the place and the reason why we're hiring this person. Whoever hired Coach K had to go through some lean times and fight for Coach K as they built to get to what they ultimately thought they were going to be at Duke. You go find any great coach, most great coaches that win championships have to go through lean times at the beginning and learn how to change the culture, build the culture, and everything is different. Everything is different. Nothing is apple to apple.
I think the Coach K analysis is a lot better than the Saban one for this analogy, because Coach K actually walked into a team that was a top 20 team the year before. I mean, they weren't like this bad program that had never won and he had to build them. So, but the point is, I still say you should have won 10 games in 2022. You should have won 10 games in 2023. And the fact that you didn't, not regular season in 2022. Like, again, you could still say they should have been better, but, you know, the expectation I had of winning, they should have gone 10-2 in the regular season. That also was the expectation that Tyler Buchner was going to be your starting quarterback all year. You know, there was a lot of things that went into that year. That's something that you look at the health of the program. I think that they showed in 24, they're far more able to sustain key injuries in 24 than they in 25 than they were in 22 and 23. And I think that shows an overall level of growth and health for the program. So we're going to wrap that up, part 1 up right there, because we're going to try to, we do have some questions we want to answer about 2026 and then mailbag. So before we head on to part 2, folks, do me a favor, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review if you're listening via any podcast platform. And of course, as always, best way to support what we're doing down there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Sean, let's wrap this up with part 2. of the show. And part 2 is really going to be, okay, we're going into year 5. We just talked about a million things, Sean. We were going to spend an hour on that. You and I spent 2 hours on that because that's just what we do. And I think everybody in the chat knew this was going to be that kind of show, because there's a lot to have an honest conversation and not just throw out like the bangers to try to get clicks. Like Marcus Freeman's underachieved to 3 or 4 years. Boom, put that out there in a little short. And then, you know, you get, well, no, we want to have a real conversation of like, you could make that argument, but here's why, even if you accept that on the whole, I think that he's met expectations. You know what I mean? Like, because we're trying to get to the reality and the truth of the situation. But here's where we are now. Whatever you think about, you know, Chief and I disagreed on something. Andrew and I have disagreed on something. There's all things that we can disagree on. I think the one thing that we all agree on, and Chief and Andrew and other people, if you guys don't agree with what I'm about to say, let me know. We all agree going into year 5, the expectation absolutely is that you should play for a championship in 2026. That's what this team is. I think we all agree that this is one of the 3 or 4 best rosters in all of college football, if not the best roster in college football. I think you can at least debate if it's the best. But when was the last time prior to the last couple of years you could debate that Notre Dame had the best roster in college football? It's been a while. And so I think when you look at it right now, I look at 2026, year 5 of Marcus Freeman. This is we're about to learn who he really, truly is in 2026. Is he a coach that's really good but not elite? Or is he elite? That was sort of the knock on Ryan Day for a long. Nobody debated, in my opinion. Like anyone that was having an honest conversation, nobody thought Ryan Day was a bad coach. You don't keep going to the playoffs and winning 10, 11 games every year, playing in big bowls, if you're not at least a pretty good coach. You're not Kirby. You're not Dabo. You're not Saban. You're not Urban. But you're a pretty good football coach. And then until he kicked the door down and said, okay, cool, I'm going to go out and win one. You know, and so when I look at Marcus Freeman, I say you're entering that period where now is when you truly show who you are. Now is when you show who you are. And I honestly felt like Ohio State's 23 team, that's his 5th year, did not have the talent that Notre Dame has in 26. I think the 26 Notre Dame team reminds me a lot more of Ryan Day's 2024 team, where you looked at it preseason, you're like, that's the best roster in college football. The question is, can they put it all together? And that's where I think Notre Dame is right now. So when you look at it, what are the things that we need to see from Marcus Freeman in these key areas to say, okay, they didn't peak and they're going to now come back down the mountain, but that they're here to stay? And let's first begin, Sean, with just a quick look at recruiting. What do we need to see from a recruiting standpoint over this next year that says last year wasn't a fluke? You were riding the momentum of the 24 season. Saban's gone. Dabo's struggling. You know, you're taking advantage of some certain things to kind of have that great year, but it's not repeatable. You can't stack classes like that. So what do we need to see from them in 27 to say, okay, Notre Dame is that's just who they are now from a recruiting standpoint?
Well, from a recruiting standpoint, and remind me, I have to send you some screenshots of a conversation I recently had with a recruit that I think is going to be paramount for a particular position on the offensive side of the ball and what needs to be seen during the spring. But I think it's one of the challenges in the spring and the transition of this offense, what this offense is going to look like. 55% run last year, well understandable with your best 2 players, your 2 best players, shall I say, being your running backs. Can this offensive line become a strength? Can it become elite? It's been good. It's been good. Once again, let me say the offensive line has been good. Can it become dominant and elite? Because that's what needs to happen up front in the trenches on both sides of the ball to win a national championship. It's been evident the last 3 years, and it needs to be evident for this 2026 team. I think that's going to go a long way to helping them solidify what I think they have some really big time kids on the offensive line. James Halter is already locked in. Then they have some other guys like Cameron Wagner, who has a great relationship with Joe Rudolph. But getting him on campus in the spring, he camped at Notre Dame. That's going to be a big time guy. The Von Layton kid, Leighton Von Brandt, I'm sorry. He's coming in for a spring visit. Just having that, it's easy to say you don't want to lose any ground because the offensive line recruiting at Notre Dame has been consistent from Heastan to Joe Rudolph. I mean, Notre Dame offensive line, when you walk in, speaks for itself to most high school players across the nation that are offensive linemen. They know I'm going to be developed, I'm going to win games, and I'm going to be really good when I get to the pros because most offensive linemen from Notre Dame, when they get to the pros, they get not one, not two, but at least 3 contracts usually and have a really solid career. And then the 4 for 40 really begins to work for you once you stop playing the game. But other positions, I think this spring and this season are going to be very important because, like you said, Mike Denbrock, top 5 offense, CJ Carr being a Heisman favorite. Are we going to see the offense go from 50% run to 50% pass? Even when Mike Denbrock had those 2 great receivers and a Heisman winning quarterback, he still ran the ball 45% of the time at LSU, right? So I don't know if he gets too far away from his DNA as a play caller. I don't even know if they get to 55% pass, maybe 52-48, 53-47 or something like that. But it's going to be very important that their wide receiver targets starting in the spring can see certain things that wide receivers look for from a development standpoint. And that wide receiver room, they've acquired a lot of talent, whether it's the 26 class, whether it's the portal class, and the previous classes before that exist now. You have a room with a lot of high ceiling, shall I say. There's a lot of high ceiling in that room that if things work or if guys are developed, you might get 5-star caliber players that go on and become first, second round NFL draft picks coming out of that room, which is what you need to see that because you're starting to see it at the defensive back room, which is going to yield what you got in the 2026 defensive back haul, right? You want to see that 27, 28. And the numbers in 27, Brian, are only going to be 2 to 3 wide receivers. If they go more than 3 wide receivers,
yeah, I don't see them. The only way they go more than 3 is if there's somebody in there that's like he may play DB, he may play someone, he may, he may be something different, or they have a mass exodus from the roster, which I don't see happening. I think there's a scenario, there's a world in which if they only got 2 receivers, I'm thrilled.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say they get Julius Jones Jr. and Quentin Burrell, and they're like, dude, we're only going to take 2. We love the kids we had. Bubba had a great spring. Braden had a great spring. Caden, Devin, Dylan, they all had great springs. Like, we like what we're at. We like where we're at. And they just took those 2 guys or one of those 2 guys and another top guy. There's other good receivers on the board. Okay. I think for me, Sean, it really comes down to you have to have another class that was like last year.
Yeah.
Do you have to have it? Does it have to be number 1 or number 2? I don't really care where it's ranked. The only reason I point out where it's ranked this year is because finally they figured out and they gave Notre Dame the proper respect. At least one of the services did. 247 still didn't. But I look at it and say you just have to have another year where you meet your needs with impact players across the board. Whether that's 19 signees, 25 signees, or somewhere in between. That's where I care. Just stack another class like that. And look, I will always consider the 27 class. I will always grade it as having Teddy Gerard in it. For me. Like, that's how I'm going to look at it. I know technically for recruiting rankings, he's not, but he's going to be involved in recruiting 2027 players. Why is Easton Royal looking at Notre Dame right now? Because of Teddy Gerard. He would have been in this class. So I think you just got to stack another class. From a staff standpoint, Sean, it really comes down to this is the year that we can put a grade definitively on you as a hirer when you're looking at Marcus Freeman. Does your patience with Joe Rudolph pay off in 2026? Does your patience with Mike Brown pay off in 2026? Does your faith in Chris Ash pay off in 2026? Does your faith in Marty Biaggi and Lauren Landau pay off in 2026? Those are things that we're going to find out, because that's what's going to be needed for this team to reach their full potential, is that Ash is what Marcus Freeman thinks he is. Now, do I think Marcus Freeman was frustrated with Chris Ash early last year? Yes, I do. But why would Marcus Freeman kind of get Ash to go in a different direction and then keep him? Because he knows that that's part of the adjustment, having not been in college football for 5 years. In that regard, it is somewhat similar to what Al Golden went through. I think Al Golden's situation was different than Chris Ash's, but that's why Marcus Freeman was more patient then. It's because he understood there's an adjustment period. Now it's up to Marcus Freeman. And if Chris Ash does not run the defense we want him to run this year, I don't blame Chris Ash. I blame Marcus Freeman. Say, you've got to make sure he knows what kind of defense you want and then let him go run it. Because Chris Ash showed, there's this notion from some that in the last, there were literally people saying during the season last year, Sean, I know you remember this, I don't think Chris Ash is actually calling plays. I think Mixon's is calling plays. I can tell you that was not, Chris Ash was calling plays. That's not even a question, a debate. If think about this for a second, folks. If Mike Mickens was calling plays at the end of last year, do you think that Marcus Freeman lets him walk for the same title with the Ravens, or is it more plausible that Marcus Freeman would have had Chris Ash walk and he would have promoted Mickens to coordinator, since the one concern he had was he hadn't called plays before? If he called plays during the last 2 months of the season when Notre Dame was tearing it up, do you think he leaves? No. Because, Sean, you know what I know. Mike Mickens doesn't care about titles. Mike Mickens cared about responsibility, the responsibility of being the coordinator, of the play caller. If he didn't get the title, but he was going to call plays this year because he did last year, he's not leaving. Chris Ash called the plays. Now, did Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman have an influence on the direction that Chris Ash took the defense? Of course, and that's okay. But Chris Ash was still the one designing it and calling it. And if he doesn't do that again this year, there's only one person to blame, and it ain't Chris Ash. It's Marcus Freeman. If the O-line underachieves again this year, then we've got to look back and say, your unwillingness to hold the offensive assistants to the same standard you hold the defensive assistants is what kept you from reaching your team's full potential. And that's where we can maybe have some pushback on the hiring. But as of right now, I think he's done what he's needed to do. And now's the year, in year 5, where you've got to put it all together and say, okay, we're going to be that team. And if you don't win a title, it's because you get beat by a team who's just generally better than you, which is plausible. There's a scenario in which Texas or Oregon is just better than Notre Dame. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame plays to the maximum of their potential. That team's just better. So you got to go out and recruit and develop even better the next year. You know what I mean? But if it's not that, then I'm at the point now where I'm not using the justifications of a new coach and learning and all this kind of stuff. You're in year 5 now. That stuff's behind you.
So I think from a coaching standpoint, there's some very interesting things individually that need to be watched, right? Like kind of subplots of the season. I think CJ Carr answering the Notre Dame second-year regression quarterback thing, right? Which I don't think anybody expects to see it, but we haven't seen it. Nobody expects to see it, but we haven't seen it on the positive side. So it's still.
I don't. What's a second-year quarterback?
Starting a second-year starting quarterback in Notre Dame.
That's a thing?
Yeah.
I didn't know. It's been so long, Sean. I just didn't even realize that was the thing. I didn't know you were allowed to have a quarterback start more than 2 years, 1 year in a row. That's pretty awesome.
You can. And
learn something new every day.
Usually when they do, it doesn't go well. So it's like, I don't think we expect it. to be similar to what we've seen, but it's something that we still have to see. Something that, was brought up from a recruiting standpoint, but also from a staff standpoint. What happens behind CJ Carr, right? Because the truth of the matter is, CJ Carr was a Tommy Rees evaluation. Tommy Rees closed that deal.
That's 100% correct.
That's just truth of the matter. So now the quarterbacks behind him are guys that Gino evaluated and closed the deal on. So now looking at the backup quarterback competition during the spring is going to be a full view of Gino Guidugli as an evaluator, recruiter, and developer as a coach. That's going to become very interesting from his quarterback situation. You already broke down the offensive line. It's been good. Can it become dominant? Can we see a dominant offensive line under Joe Rudolph? Health is going to play a major part in that. So now you talk about Orlando, the health of this team, the strength of this team. And I think we have seen them become a team that physically imposes themselves. So what Marcus Freeman wants to do, I think we've seen evidence from the strength and conditioning program, like, okay, that's matched up with what the head coach has wanted to do, which is to win in the trenches and be a physical team. But now the next step is, can you do that against other physical, talented teams, right? Like
which you did not do against Miami.
Absolutely.
It's basically, Sean,
you talked about that, how they weren't ready for certain reasons,
not even close,
to go up against Miami, which goes to that point.
You go look at Anthony Knapp's foot quickness in that game, and then you go 2 months later, you fast forward 2 months, and you look at his foot quickness, and the mid-zone film was a perfect example of that. You look at him running mid-zone against Miami, it's not that he's getting beat. He couldn't move. His footwork was so bad. They were clearly not ready for that game. And you could argue, it was humid and all that. Dude, that was that way from the beginning of the game. So what, he get tired in warm-ups? So that's all kind of part of that preparation of getting them ready. We know that Lauren Lando can get this team ready to play great football in October, November, December, and January. Like, we know that.
Right. And that used to be a problem, right? During the season, Notre Dame players being able to keep their weight on.
Right.
Be as strong going into December.
That's right.
That used to be an issue. Lauren Lando, like you said, has done a great job.
Yeah, Matt Bayless started that, and then Lauren Landau's continued that. The difference is you've got to be better in September. That's going to be the key, what they can do that. But look, this team has got too much talent not to be legitimately one of the best teams, and not playing like at the end of the year, but you still don't make the playoffs because you stubbed your toe in 2 stupid games you should have won, or at least gone 1-1 against. That's where I'm at, Sean. This team needs to reach its full potential. Is there a world where this team reaches its full potential and they don't win a championship? Yes. Yes, there is. But it better be that kind of thing where you run into a 2020 Bama, a 2019 LSU, where a team that's just, dude, we were very good this year. That team was just better than us. And we've got to figure out a way to get better than them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't foresee. I'll say this, man. We talk about expectations. Before the last 2 years, and I think you said this kind of like in a different way. Before the last 2 years, when's the last time you felt like Notre Dame was a legitimate national championship contender?
Prior to 2024?
Yeah.
Probably 2018. Where and what I mean by legitimate national title contender is where you don't need to catch breaks. You just need to play your game.
Yeah.
2018 is probably the last time. There's teams since then that I thought had a chance to play for the title. 2020, I don't know if I thought that team was going to go there, but 2024, definitely. I think 2025 was definitely a team. But prior to that stretch, 2018 was that team. 2015 was one of those teams. The 2014 team should have been way better. So there have been some, but it's been a minute. It's been
my point to go to what we're talking about with expectations and meeting expectations. Like 24 set the expectation, and now at 25, it's like, yeah, we should win the national championship. 26, we should win the national championship. That's not just from your heart or from your fandom.
Right.
It's from the roster.
Right.
It's from the talent. It's from the coaching. It's from the recruiting. Everything is like, okay, everything is lining up, which goes to the point that you made about this season and what you're going to find out about Marcus Freeman. Like the last 3 years have really raised the level of expectations to where it's like, okay, now, so that goes back to that moving target. Like the first 2 years were kind of like a moving target here, there. You see good things, you see bad things. You know, like I said, you shouldn't have lost this game, you shouldn't have lost that game. Once again, that just goes back to the fact that when you're learning, you're learning. You're learning on the job. There are going to be hiccups, unexpected hiccups, and I look, once again, as much as we talk, this is a conversation, honestly, and a tip of the cap as we sit here today to have this conversation and to be able to have a show like this. I'm like, yo, okay, whatever you saw in that first meeting, as you pointed out, whatever Jack Swarbrick saw, like, I'm glad you had the glasses on. I'm glad you had the correct glasses on that day, because what you saw and what you stood on and what you proved to others to be able to put Marcus Freeman in position to kind of get this program to where it's at. And hopefully what Notre Dame fans will get to watch in 2026, as far as being a national championship season, that would be a really darn good 30 for 30. That'll be a real darn good 30 for 30 if Notre Dame is able to finish the deal. Like, you would start the 30 for 30 from the day Brian Kelly decided to leave for LSU, show clips of Vince and Brian talking about it on the 30 for 30, and then just go year by year and how everything changed and how the national view of Notre Dame changed with kids in recruiting, how the coaching staff shifted and became elite, and how Notre Dame finally finished the deal. It'd be absolutely fantastic. And probably it would be everything Jack Swarbrick thought he saw in Marcus Freeman when he hired him. He probably saw all of this was going to happen. And so to be able to talk about it and say, yeah, I don't, because you said they could still lose. They can meet expectations and still lose to somebody in the playoffs. But to be honest, a lot of people feel like it's boom or bust this year. And I really wouldn't push back on fans that feel like, no, this is the season they need to win a national championship this season. And goes back to that question we had on Friday, right? When someone asked us, would you take the definite championship next year versus 8 years with Marcus Freeman at the helm and feeling like they're still going to be national title contenders, but you just don't know if they're going to win a national championship, and they possibly in the 8 years have a chance to win multiple championships? I just really thought that was a great question. But man, look here. Just the fact that we're sitting here having this conversation, this is a fun conversation, fans. This is an absolutely fun and amazing conversation as my best friend joins the show.
Yeah, Sadie keeps pawing at me. I think she wants to be on the show. So she's like, hey, man, I want to talk about this. Y'all talking about Notre Dame in 2026? I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. So she keeps pawing at me. So I just got to give her some attention.
So, no, I think exactly what you said. I'm excited about this spring. I'm excited about this pro day. I think this pro day is going to be one of the most visited pro days by NFL teams since I've been covering it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to lead the way to next year's pro day, which is probably going to be even bigger.
It's going to be insane
with the talent they have coming out next year. Absolutely. Because, you go back, what was that, 2 years ago? It was mainly Joe Alt that people really came to see. And there really wasn't a lot of NFL teams. And now you have 7 guys invited to the combine. 7 guys that have a chance to go in the first 4 rounds of the NFL draft, depending upon the projection.
And there's a lot of stuff coming out right now, Sean, about those guys, and we'll talk more about this tomorrow. Daniel Jeremiah had a mock draft today that had 2 Notre Dame guys going in the first round.
Yeah.
So, I'm just
saying spring football, everything surrounding from recruiting. Yeah. It's going to be exciting to watch the coaches in the spring. Yeah. It's going to be exciting to see how the competitions play out. It's going to be exciting to see, okay, what are they doing differently? What drills are they doing differently?
Yeah.
What is this coach focusing on? It's going to be fun to see the continuity because of the relationship with Chris Ash and the new guys on the defense side of the ball. Are things going to be taught differently? Or is it going to help the players pick up on it differently? Is the zone going to be tighter when they play it? All of those things are going to be really exciting. Right. And then I'm going to be excited to see how Marcus Freeman is moving, right? Because he left the offense alone a lot last year, almost entrusting it to Mike Denbrock. And going into the second year with CJ, does he even feel even more confident to allow that? And now with the new coaches, does he really oversee the defense side of the ball, or does he balance it because now there's continuity, coaches? He doesn't have to worry about things getting lost in translation between Chris Ash. He has guys that are very comfortable and know Chris Ash, know what he wants, knows what he likes. So now, does he balance it off a little bit more and go watch the off? I'm telling you, this spring is going to be really
Chris Ash knows the Notre Dame players more than he did last year.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to be interesting, fans, this spring to really see how things play out and what type of coach Marcus Freeman is going to become. And that starts in the spring, I believe. You're going to see him more confident because he has a starting quarterback coming back, right? So that should give him more confidence. Looking forward to it.
Here's where I'm at, Sean. I said before 2024, with the way that Notre Dame had been recruiting, the 23 class, the 24 class, when you think about all the talented NFL players that they brought in those 2 classes, and we didn't pay any attention to all the BS rankings. And the thing I pointed out too, even for people who do like rankings, even though the ranking was like 8 to 12, you can't look at it like, well, they rate this year and they rate that year. It's the same class. No, the overall points, even when they were like 8, 9, were way higher than they had been in the past. And I had pointed out that like some of those Freeman classes in 23 and 24 would have been top 5 classes in other years because of, they had more points. It just, there was in 23 and 24, there was a lot of talent at the high school level being concentrated in like 10 programs according to those rankings. But we knew those classes were better than top 8 to 10 classes. With the things that Notre Dame was doing to support Marcus Freeman, with the Mike Denbrock hire, with some of the things we were seeing in the program, I think I said flat out, they're going to win a championship in the next 3 years. I didn't say this year or next year. I don't know which year it's going to be because things happen, but they're going to win one the next 3 years. So yeah, I will say if they don't win one this year, I will be a little bit disappointed. I mean, you're seeing people jump on the bandwagon, and we're going to talk about this in tomorrow's show. But why are people jumping on the bandwagon? Well, I think there's a lot of different layers to it. And we'll talk about those tomorrow. But I do think that if Marcus Freeman is the coach that ultimately we think he is, because that's what this all boils down to, right, Sean? Or you can nitpick this, you can nitpick that, you can be legitimately critical of this and legitimately critical of that, but still say when you put it all together, right? Like I may not like a certain ingredient by itself, right? Like I'm not just going to sit there and eat a bowl of garlic while I'm watching a movie. You know what I'm saying? But like I cook with garlic, you know what I mean? Like I don't want my throat catch on fire. You're not going to sit there and just like get spoonful of cumin and eat it while you're, for dessert, right? But as an ingredient to something, it makes something beautiful. This ingredient needs to go here. And some of these mistakes or these things that Freeman has struggled with are reasons why we're saying good things now, because you learn from those things. That's part of the learning process of a young coach. Well, now you're in year 5. You're not a young coach anymore. You're in your 40s now. You've gotten the D coordinator you wanted. You got the OC you wanted. You've got all these different things you want. The program supporting you financially. They went out and paid top dollar to get the assistant coaches they got. They went out and paid top dollar to get the receivers. I mean, the recruiting class that they wanted in the portal and in the high school. Everything is going your way. Now it's time to put it all together. I mean, that's where you're at. It's time for you to say, okay, we went through our ups and downs. We learned our lessons. Now it's time to say, this is our time, and seize hold of it. And that requires Marcus Freeman to be able to instill the same type of not the same type, but the type of leadership needed at the player level to compete, at the coach level to compete, and then, of course, with him to compete. Because we're at a point now where it's like, okay, there are no more excuses for Notre Dame. There are no more, well, yes, but, and I get what you're saying, but, and here's why, and they're still not here, and they're almost, and you're there now. You felt at the end of last year as a program, you could have played with anybody. Okay, cool. Now go show it in 2026. No more, we got to overcome the early season losses. It's a new year. It's your chance to go show who you are and what you can do. And it's time, right? I mean, the 23 and 24 stuff, Sean, where we talked about the underachieving, all that kind of stuff. We can look back and say, that team underachieved, but then also say, but it's not surprising because this is part of the growing pains of a young football coach. But are they going in a good direction? And I think that is still true, but it's like, it's fine. You can go in the right direction, but where do you tap out? Where do you cap out? Do you cap out at 24, cap out at 25? Are you really talented, but you can't win the big games? Or are you going to take that next step?
I think
and that's
one of
what's
the
going to
things,
determine who he is.
one of the things about 25 is that, I mean, in life, all of us should still be ever learning. We should. And I think even in the coaching profession, I think even the greatness of Nick Saban, we saw him in the middle of his run learning and
Go
having
watch
to
Nick
adjust.
Saban's offense in 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2015 and compare it to the offense he had in 2018, 2019,
Absolutely.
2020.
Absolutely. So you just, man, hope that he could sneak out one of those wins early in the season last year as they were learning, right? But it goes back to his coaching style, which is to empower his assistants. That's his coaching style. Empower his assistants, trust them to run their rooms. And it makes Brian, it makes me think about my pops, man. Like just watching him manage, I used to always think like, dude, you are such a micromanager. Like why are you so, that's why you're so frustrated. Then I take a step back now and I'm like, oh, okay, I get why he forced himself to stay on top of things, right? But I think, as time goes on, you don't start out that way necessarily, but you learn, and then you learn what you have to do in order to be successful. And I think I had a chance to watch that, and I think we're watching Marcus Freeman learn that. I think he's shifting the way he coaches, and I think hopefully he knows when to step in. I think he saw last year he had to step in, and now hopefully he's able to do that even in the midst of a game, not having to wait week to week or wait multiple weeks. When he sees something, starting to go astray, he can kind of step up in the midst of a game and say, yo, no. I know we talked about this all week, but no, we need to do this as a head coach. Just step in and say, I know this is what we prepared for, but this is what's necessary this game. Because right now, we're not playing the way we need to play. We need to make a shift to make sure we win this game. And I think that's the next step, and not just defensively, but being able to speak that offensively, like being able to have that boldness to open it up offensively and kind of step away from, what's comfortable for you and, what's within your boundaries of that book of winning football games as a head coach that you've been putting together for years. Hopefully now you've added and sprinkled in some things that's just as aggressive as you want to be defensively. Now you can be just as aggressive offensively and, bring that marriage together and ultimately finish the deal, But like I said, for us to sit here and have this conversation is proof positive that the program is taking steps forward. It's definitely taking steps forward. And now it's meeting the expectations of just the Notre Dame brand overall.
So that'll be where we ultimately define Marcus Freeman living up to expectations, because at the end of the day, Sean, winning a championship is the ultimate expectation for Notre Dame. I don't care where you came from. That's the standard you had for Brian Kelly. It's the standard you had for Charlie Weiss. It's the standard you had for Ty Willingham, Bob Davie, George O'Leary for 15 minutes, Lou Holtz, Jerry Faust. I mean, if you don't want that expectation, then you move on. That's not your guy. Or you shouldn't be here. And the good thing is we know about Marcus Freeman is he's never shied away from that expectation, ever. He's definitely not going to do it now. And that's something that I really respect and appreciate about Marcus Freeman is he's never tried to talk down the expectations. Now, he's tried the expectations. He's tried to say, hey, listen, we can't look at it like that, though. We can't keep telling our players every day, championship, 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 championship. That's not how you build a championship team. Of course, that's the goal. That's why you're at Notre Dame. But it's about becoming the best version of yourself as an individual and then accepting your role so that your unit can become the best version of itself, which then can help become, the bigger group, offense or defense, be the best version of itself. That's the goal. And then the rest will take care of itself. He said that 2 years ago, and some people flipped out. They thought he was like saying he doesn't care about championships. He's like, look, we don't talk about winning and losing at Notre Dame. We talk about playing to a standard. And what people didn't understand is that's exactly what he's saying, because he's not like, that's the process-driven coach we want. We don't want a coach that's like, hey, we won the game. What do you guys want from me? You remember when Brian Kelly went off on me after the Wake Forest game in 2011? And it's like, dude, you beat Wake Forest by a tutty. They suck. No, you should not be happy with that. You know what I mean? Like, and that's how it always was with him. It was always like, well, we won the game. Remember, I told you after 20, or no, I didn't tell you. He said in the press conference, we just got to coach a little harder or coach a little better and play a little harder. Like, no, you don't. You need to get a new defensive coordinator and a new strength coach. And that's fortunately where Marcus Freeman has never gone down that path. He's never been someone that says, hey, we're okay just being, here. He understands we got to get here. He just now has to figure out how to get there. And this is to me going to be the year for that. So what do I need to see from Marcus Freeman in 2026? I need to see Marcus Freeman get the most out of this football team. Now, what does that look like? That'll be determined partly by outside influences. There's a world in which this team is the best team it can be, and they win a championship. There's a world in which this team is the best version of themselves, and they get beat in the semifinals of the championship game. You better at least get to that, though. Anything less than the semifinals this year is going to be a giant disappointment to me. And would make me question, okay, Freeman's a really good coach, but is he an elite championship caliber coach? That I don't know, because you're not going to have a lot of the players that you have on this team next year. So like this is a window to say, hey, look, man, it's time to get this thing done. So that's why I say it's about this team achieves its maximum success, whatever that looks like, the end result looks like. But I can confidently say I have a hard time seeing Notre Dame in a quarterfinal matchup against a team that should be better than them. Semis depends on your draw. But ultimately, I still think this team should win a championship. That's what the expectation is for this team. For me. And I'll say it because I'm not the head football coach. I don't have to worry about putting pressure on the players and stuff like that. He should not be out there every day saying championship, championship, championship. You say it once. This is the goal. And so every day when you're working, this is what we're working towards. So now that that's out there, let's go be the best version of ourselves on Tuesday, February 17th. How can we get better today? You're not going to win a championship on February 17th. but you're going to take a step towards winning a championship on February 17th. And that's what the standard needs to be, in my opinion. So hopefully, Sean, that we'll get a chance to see that here in 2026, because that's the final piece. We talked about, did they get the most out of this team, this team, this team, this team? If you get the most out of this team, I have a hard time seeing anybody beat Notre Dame. There's really only two teams that I can point to that right now that I think might have a shot to beat them if they play their best football. And that's still a maybe. Maybe Texas, maybe Oregon. Maybe. And that's where I'm at with Notre Dame in 2026. So it's going to be a fun year. I'm very much looking forward to it. This offseason is going to have it. We're going to have a lot to talk about, the different aspects of the team. But I think this was a great idea, Sean. I'm glad you came up with it. I'm glad you proposed it to me. And I said to him, I said, listen, when we get off the phone, text me. Because the other problem Sean and I have is we'll have these great conversations, and then we'll say we want to do a show on this, and then I'll text him the next day and be like, hey, do you remember what it is we were talking about last night? And he'll be like, man, it was something about, and then it'll take us a while to remember, and sometimes we just don't remember. So I said, when I get off the phone, text me what we were talking about. And so he did, and I was able to draw the outline from it, because we've had too many potentially great shows, Sean, that we forgot by the next day when we went to talk about it again. So that's what happens when you get old, and we're both old. Well, Sean may not believe he's old, but I feel old, and he's older than I am. So there you go. So anyway, that's going to do it for part 2. We got a mailbag coming up, folks. So don't you go anywhere. We're going to answer your questions here next. Tomorrow, Trev and I will be back with a midweek rundown. Thursday, we'll have some team preview stuff. And then Friday, we'll have a mailbag. So hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you listen to. And of course, as always, the best way for you to show support to what we're doing at Irish Breakdown is to sign up for our membership, our premium board membership at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Sean, let's get to our here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. Let's get to our mailbag question. We have about 13 right now, so unless we get any new ones, this won't take too long, but want to get to this one first from Raymond Harton. Raymond says, thank you for Super Chat, Raymond. He says, thank you for the link to that 47 hat the other day. Brian got here Saturday, one of the most comfortable trucker hats I've ever had. I'm telling you guys, this hat is super, super comfortable. Like, it is just incredibly comfortable hat. So I'm glad you enjoy that, Raymond. You are most welcome. So here we go, Sean, from Tavis McKay. If we had to change the schedule for this year, what previous schedule from this decade would be the most intriguing? So we're going decade. Are we going from 2020? Or is he saying like last decade from like 2017 or 2016 to now? How are you looking at that, Sean?
You know what? I'll just take the well, no. I was gonna say the year where we had Ohio State, Duke, and Louisville, and then on the road at Clemson. At the time, I just thought it was an intriguing schedule. Duke is still probably not as good as they were with Riley Leonard, but I mean, they're ACC champions. So where they stand in the ACC, which we think is not as good right now, they stand to be one of the better teams. Clemson is Clemson, right? They're going to be on your schedule for the foreseeable next 8 years. Yeah. But I mean, it would be intriguing actually to run last year's back too. To start out with Miami and Texas A&M just to see if they could, that as a litmus test to see if they've answered starting the season the way they're supposed to start.
You know what? That's why I'm actually going with 2017. Because you get Georgia in week 2 at home. You got to play at BC, at Michigan State. So you got some rivalry games. You got USC at home, a really good NC State team at home. You got to play at Stanford at the end of the year, and then you got to play at Miami in November. Learn a lot about this football team if they had a home opener or a home game against Georgia, and then later in the year had to travel to Miami. Because the thing is, if you're going to give me a schedule, you got to give me a schedule with Miami on it. I want that opportunity. The only other one that I would think about, Sean, is the 2012 schedule. That would be a as far as a really intriguing, I believe that's what the question was, is what would be the most intriguing.
At Oklahoma,
You got Michigan, right?
Michigan.
At home. You play Navy in Ireland. You've got all your rivals are on it. Purdue's on it. Michigan State's on it. Michigan's on it. USC's on it. Stanford's on it. Pitt's on it. BC's on it. So you have all your rivals are on it. Like there's not a rival not on there. So that's cool. You get Miami on that schedule. You got BYU on that schedule. You've got Oklahoma on the road on that schedule. At USC in the Coliseum on that schedule. In Spartan Stadium. Michigan at home. That'd be a great old school traditional Notre Dame schedule. Now that's outside of the last decade. That's why I went with 2017 first, but that would be another one that if I could expand his range a little bit, I'd go to the 2012 schedule. I think that'd be a fun one. It'd be a very fun one. All right, let's see here. We've got Ball Peen Shillelagh. Does it more often help or hinder coaches when they make lateral moves in terms of experience and success? It seems difficult to predict success in some of these cases.
Depends on what school you're going to. You can make a lateral move from a position standpoint, but if you're going to a higher profile program at that position, it probably means a little bit more. No different than, if you have children out there and they're vying for admission to a certain college, being from a certain school, a certain private school versus maybe a certain public school, certain schools are feeder schools into certain universities. Universities and colleges, they look at certain schools for a more majority of particular students. So if you're looking to build your career and kind of fast track it to get to wherever it is you want to get to, whether it's head coaching or coordinator, what better place to kind of put that on a fast track than to get to a place like Alabama, Notre Dame, Georgia, and if you make a lateral move to do that, then that's what you have to do. Predicting success. I mean, you go to schools like that, you have to really be either lazy or bad at your job most of the time not to be successful, or just have some level of incompetence at what you're doing, just to fail when you get to big time programs that more than likely are going to have pretty good head coaches. Now, if you just have a head coach that doesn't know what he's doing, I'm sure there are instances out there where really good coaches, assistant coaches are under bad head coaches, and it's just a bad situation. And then they go elsewhere and, end up having a better career elsewhere. So has your perception, this name just popped up, has your perception of Mike Bobo in his second stint changed? You say no.
The reason why is because I still think they struggle to do the things they need to do offensively to get the most out of their football team.
That's fair.
I think they still win, with just having better players than the guys they play against. I look at the Bama game, I look at the Auburn game, I look at the Florida game, I look at the Georgia Tech game, even the Alabama game. They should have scored 40 against Alabama in the SEC title
in the SEC title game. And what you saw, the decline of the offense with no adjustments, or when Ole Miss adjusted at halftime.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden their offense, they were humming in the first half.
Yeah.
And like I said, should have had more points. Then all of a sudden, just not in the second half. Yeah.
And they can't run the ball in the bigger moments, the bigger games. So it's an issue for me. Look, I think coaching is all about fit. It just depends on Ball Peen where you go. Are you going? I've seen coaches make moves where they go somewhere. I'm like, I even said to a guy that used to coach Notre Dame, he took a job a couple years ago. I was like, dude, don't take it. Don't take it. Like, I know why you're taking it. I get it. But I'm telling you, dude, that coach is not going to last more than a year. And if he goes down, you're going down with him. Like, guy was a good football coach, but, he wasn't able to salvage the train wreck that he was walking into. So I just think all those things factor into it. It's about fit. So much of it is fit. All right, we got one from Outbound 1219. He says, what other first-time head coach could have done what Freeman has done at Notre Dame theoretically? Look, Outbound, I appreciate the question, and I it's just that theoretically I don't know what I can tell you. I mean, we can point to what other coaches did. Dan Lanning had a lot of success. Dan Lanning's been in the playoffs twice. They were hired the same year. He went to the playoffs twice. Marcus Freeman's gone once. Does that mean that Dan Lanning could do it? I don't know, because doing it at Notre Dame is different than doing it at Oregon. Would Marcus Freeman have had more success at Oregon than Dan Lanning? Less success at Oregon than Dan Lanning? I don't have an answer to that. I mean, I can simply tell you, Dabo walked into a different situation at Clemson than what Marcus Freeman and Dan Lanning walked into. I mean, it's just, Ryan Day was a first-time head coach who went to the playoffs, each of his first 4 years, right, Sean? I mean, I believe they definitely did in 19. They lost to Clemson in 19. They lost to Bama in the title game in 2020. 2021, they played – is that the year they played Utah in the Rose Bowl? 2022, they played in the playoffs. Yeah, so they made the playoffs 3 of his first 4 years. They were a top 10 team 3 of his first 4 years. Actually, every year. But, I mean, they're actually top 6 3 of his first 4 years. Could he have done that at Notre Dame? I don't know. I have no idea. Notre Dame is different than Ohio State. Doesn't make it hard, doesn't make it easier. It's just different. So I don't know who would have done better or not better. So, I mean, I appreciate the conversation you're trying to have. It's just, it's hard for me to answer that question because who knows? Who knows? I don't know the answer to that question. So, really, it just, it's a very fair question to have, and it's a good conversation to have. It's just not one that I personally care to engage in because it's just the unknowns. What I know is that Marcus Freeman has what he's done at Notre Dame, areas where he's had success and areas where he's had some missteps. I wouldn't say failures, but just missteps or mistakes or shortcomings. And that's where I just, I want to see Coach continue to develop. But I don't know how he would have done it at Oregon, just like I don't know what Dan Lanning would do at Notre Dame. They're very different situations. Sean, you can take a swing at this one if you'd like. It's just not one that I really feel like I'm going to be able to give a good answer for because I struggle to look at it that way.
I mean, if you're being theoretically, multiple candidates, probably could have done it outcome-wise, but the styles would have been different. It would have been a different way because people are different. And you insert that personality into the situation, you could have a successful outcome and multiple 10-win seasons, a championship game appearance, but it's done a different way. Does a guy do it differently with multiple top 5 recruiting classes in the first 4 to 5 seasons? Does someone do it with the stronger coaching staff and more head coaching experience, being able to overcome and not have the lows and have more consistency? I mean, yeah, it's probably a lot of different paths to get to where Notre Dame gets to, and might be an individual that would have been able to lead them there theoretically. But like Brian said, it's about fit, and then it's about the vessel, right? Because whoever that vessel is, things have to flow through that vessel, and they can only flow by how that vessel is created or formed. So it just would have looked a little bit different, but it definitely could have been the same outcome theoretically with different people.
Got one from Sine Cosine Tangent. OT, you can change one law in the state of Indiana. What law are we changing? Do you consider taxes laws, Sean? I mean, they're kind of laws if I don't pay them. Yeah. I think it's absolutely absurd that there's property taxes on homes. Because people say, well, you're a homeowner. No, I'm not. I don't own my home. If I don't pay property taxes for over 2-3 years, Sean, do I get to keep my home? No, I don't. So I don't own my home. And so I'm a big fan of what's going on in the state of Florida. I'll just say this. We fought a revolution for taxes that aren't nearly as bad as the taxes we have to suffer through now in our different states and in our federal government. So that would be one thing, is get rid of property taxes. If you're a homeowner, You own that land, you own that home. I shouldn't have to pay the government for my property. You want to make me pay some sort of city tax for the roads and that's fine. But like I have to pay for electricity. So if I want to tap into the electricity, I got to pay for it. You know what I mean? Like we have a well, so it's not like I'm using city water. You know what I mean? So no, I think that would be one that I would get rid of. I think it's absurd and criminal that we have to pay property taxes for our homes. Because that way, say, who's a homeowner? No one that pays property taxes is a homeowner. I mean, because if you can take it away from me and you're not in the wrong, then it's not mine, it's yours. Correct? So that would be one that I would absolutely change.
And the list is too long in Illinois. So
speaking of 5-hour shows.
That's a 5-hour show. So.
All right. We got another one from Paul Beach. What would it have taken for BK to be fired by Notre Dame? Not to rehash things, but I'm curious. Some schools have a lower tolerance for BS than others. I don't know that it's about schools. It was more so about Jack Swarbrick. But I think I'll let you give your answer to this one, Sean. Because I think he should have been fired after 2026.
2016, you mean?
Mm-hmm.
You said
2016. If I could fire him, I'd hire him again just to fire him again.
Yes. You're that petty.
BK, you want to come be an analyst for us this year? Sure, man. I'll do that for a year. Get my week later. Hey, this ain't working out, man. Gotta let you go.
He had some questionable things off the field happen on his watch, or technically on the field. Maybe another one of those things probably, would have raised the ire of some at the school. And another 4-8 season definitely would have put a target on his back and would have lit the fire underneath Jack Swarbrick, or people would have probably applied pressure to Jack Swarbrick saying, hey, this is what you fought for. Like, you fought for this guy, and here we are again, back in the same spot that we were in 2016. So, but as long as he coasted the way he did and didn't bring up money, yeah, he might have still been here.
That's the unfortunate thing. I don't think that they would have fired him. And I think that they would have been, here's how I think the seasons would have played out. They would have been better in 2022 with Kelly's head coach. Can we agree on that? They'd have been about the same in 23, and they wouldn't have been nearly as good in 24. Because they might make the playoffs in 24. They might even beat Indiana at home. There is a snowball's chance in HE double hockey sticks that they go down to New Orleans and beat Georgia in the Superdome. How do I know that? Because I watched Brian Kelly fail on that stage every single time. So no, they wouldn't have been as successful. But would that have been enough for him to get fired? I don't think so. Like Justin Sniper said, a second 4-8 season would have got him fired. Agree. But the point is, he wasn't going to have that again. There are too many built-in advantages to Notre Dame now that you're just not going to be 4-8 again. We were going to keep seeing him coast on easy-ish schedules, and that would have been the difference. So, yeah. Another one from Ball Peen. You wake up in an alternate reality where Notre Dame has just been moved to the SEC and you're Notre Dame's AD. What changes do you make to optimize Notre Dame's performance against the SEC, if any? I got an easy answer to this one, Sean. Keep doing what you're doing right now.
Yeah. Are they a full participant like they are with the ACC, or are they just full?
So you're thinking other sports?
Yeah. I'm thinking like, okay, are they playing 4 or 5 games, 5 to 6 games a year against the SEC?
Let's say the way he says it, it's an alternate reality, and you've moved to the SEC. I take that as you're a full partner in the SEC.
There's not much that'll change. Notre Dame's not scared to play big time teams, so The schedule is the schedule. They're recruiting at an SEC level. They've already planted roots and begun to plant roots in the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida now, with the St. Thomas Aquinas kids in 27 and 28. You move that all the way over to Alabama, Texas. They've been very successful. So they already have the roadmap for recruiting to go ahead and be competitive. So I don't really think they would change anything. NIL, the changes they made with the portal and being more aggressive in that area, they're already moving to kind of being ready, almost like if push comes to shove down the road, we're already in position the way we set things up from a business side, coaching side, recruiting side, and the total program to make the change. So
I just say keep doing what you're doing. I mean, you're literally building the best roster in college football. Keep doing that. I mean, if Notre Dame goes 10-2 last year and they're in the SEC, they're in the playoffs. So, yeah. Got one from Aaron Valerio. Thank you, Aaron. Assuming everything falls into place for the Irish this fall, going undefeated and getting a bye, what is your dream scenario for the playoffs, and what three teams would y'all want to play to win a natty? Well, this is we get asked this every offseason. This answer has changed dramatically for me since your boy got fired down in the old Bayou. So I got to think about this one for a second, Sean. So you want to take first crack at this one?
Sure, it's easy for me.
Okay.
Miami, Texas A&M, Ohio State. Those are the three teams in the last 2 years. Those are the three teams. If I can line them up in the playoffs, 3 consecutive games to kind of avenge the last 2 years, let's get it. Give me Miami in the first game. No, give me Texas A&M in the first game, Miami in the second game, Ohio State in the national championship. Bing, bang, boom.
So let me ask you this, Sean. Is it not enough to beat Miami in the regular season, or do you want to beat them twice?
No. I want to give them their only blemish,
and
then see them again in the semifinals.
Oh, so you want to beat them twice? You're trying to do your boy.
Yeah,
hey, you're trying to do your boy JP dirty.
Oh, that's the only way to do it. That's all he owes me. He owes me for certain recruiting infractions.
You trying to do your boy JP dirty, Sean. I'm going to have to hit him up after the show, man. You are trying to do him dirty, man.
He knows.
Wrong.
He knows. He knows. Absolutely.
Oh, my goodness.
Line him up.
Oh, my goodness.
Because beating them at home isn't enough. That's not enough.
I get you.
Because they expect, you guys were at home. We beat you at home. No. Let's go to a neutral field.
Okay. I'm with you on that.
Take it to a neutral field.
Spank them twice. I get you on that one. Okay. I look at it like this. They already beat A&M once. I'm not worried about the A&M game. A&M played the game of their lives. Notre Dame played terrible and still almost won. I'm not worried about A&M. Miami, I handle in the regular season. Handle that business in the regular season. Notre Dame gets a bye, as he said. Quarterfinals, Notre Dame smacks Alabama. Absolutely smacks Alabama. Semifinals, Notre Dame beats Texas. That's the team Notre Dame hasn't been able to beat. I know it's not Saban anymore, but I still want that win over Bama. Notre Dame hasn't beaten Alabama since 1987. I want to see that dub against Alabama. Texas is big because obviously they're an ascending program as well. You're trying to recruit that state. Beating them in the semifinals would be a huge boost for you in recruiting. And then championship game, it's easy, Sean. We're on the same page. You had Ohio State last, right? Yeah. I mean, we've already seen Notre Dame beat Georgia, so I don't need to see that one again. If you do, I'm not bothered by it. But I would love to be able to beat Ohio State in the championship game. Like, those are the three dragons I think you want to slay. Texas isn't a dragon you need to slay. Bama and Ohio State are. You've beaten everybody else except because you already beat Miami in the regular season, because that's a team you haven't beaten, obviously since 2016? Last time Notre Dame beat Miami? Because they lost in 2017 and then again last year. So be nice to get that one. But yeah, Bama, Texas and Ohio State would be the 3. Somebody said Michigan. I don't care enough about Michigan anymore. I just don't think about Michigan. And also, I wouldn't want Michigan to be in the playoffs. Part of me, and Indy Wine and Cheese said this, I want USC so we can have an easy win and show that they can't run from us even if they tried. Here's the only problem with that, Indy Wine and Cheese. For Notre Dame in this scenario to beat USC, that means USC has to make the playoffs and win a game to get there, and I just can't go there. Just can't go there. But I will also say this, I wouldn't be upset if Notre Dame had to play USC in a playoff game. I would be upset.
I don't even respect them.
That's kind of why they're not on my 3. Trev's Beisel glasses. If Kelly wasn't looking for an out from Notre Dame and he was still the head coach, would Notre Dame be in a conference due to having a bad track record against top 10 teams? No. Brian Kelly doesn't make that decision. Jack Swarbrick and the father, that's whoever's running the school, and people like that make that decision, not Brian Kelly. Bad Bandana Man. Need to make sure I said that one right. Do y'all think an 11-1 in record this year's schedule will be good enough to get into the college football playoffs? Personally, I think it does, but depends on the loss as well. Notre Dame needs to leave, no doubt, this year. There's zero question that Notre Dame will be in the playoffs at 11-1. I don't even think – who has been left out at 11-1? Nobody. Not in the 12-team playoff. I don't see a world in which there's 11 teams ranked higher than Notre Dame in a 12-team playoff if they're 11-1. Yes, I get it. The schedule's not strong and all that, but still 11-1 gets you in. They went 11-1 in 2024 and didn't play a schedule that's any tougher than this one. I would actually argue this schedule is going to be tougher than the 24 schedule. I mean, nobody on 2024 is as good as Miami. A&M and SMU aren't that much different, in my opinion. BYU's better than who was then Louisville. So and they lost to a MAC team that year and made it. I think the only question 11-1 would be what's your seed going to be? Are you going to get a bye? Or are you going to play? Are you going to host? They're probably going to have to host. If Notre Dame goes 11-1 against the schedule, I don't know that I'd give them a bye. Like if you look at like Texas and Ohio State, if those teams are like 11-2 and they either went 11-1 in the regular season and lost their conference title game, or went 10-2 and won their conference championship, those teams with their schedules with 2 losses should be ranked higher than Notre Dame with 1 losses, barring one of those losses being like really bad. Either they lost to somebody terrible or they just got shellacked you know what I mean? Like 11-2 against their schedules is going to be more impressive to me than 11-1 at Notre Dame's schedule. Most likely. Now, could there be scenarios where Notre Dame's schedule is tougher than we think it's going to be? Sure. But I'm just saying based on what we know now. Thoughts on that, Sean? We on the same page on that one?
Sorry. Yeah, pretty much. I think there's something about, I guess the one loss would depend on, like I said, who the one loss is to. But for the most part, Notre Dame is in a good position right now, which is crazy because if they do expand it, they're just leaving more cushion for Notre Dame, in my opinion. But yeah, I agree with what you said.
So on the same page. Bad Bandana Man. If Marcus Freeman wins a natty in the next 2 years, does he leave or does he leave in the next 2 years anyway, in your opinion, BD? So I'll answer this question now. And I don't really want to keep answering this question all off season. We keep being asked this. I don't know when Marcus Freeman is going to leave. Do I think Marcus Freeman contemplated leaving after this year? Yes. Do I think how Marcus Freeman felt this offseason would lead one to believe that the next year or two is his last year or two at Notre Dame? I think that's possible. But I also think there are reasons why he felt that way that I don't know that they're the same now. And I've said this before. I think the year leading up to now was a very challenging one for Marcus Freeman. Very emotionally draining. You went right from the title game disappointment to the offseason to 2025 and the challenges that season presented. And I think Marcus Freeman is a grinder. And at times I think grinders can burn out. And I think Marcus Freeman this offseason honestly was dealing with some burnout, Sean. And there was a thought process of like, look, man, I'm just at the point where it'd be nice to not have the same kind of offseason. I think that some things that have happened at Notre Dame with Marcus Freeman, I think that maybe he doesn't feel that strongly anymore. Once he committed to coming back, I think there was a sense that he was ready to come back. I think Notre Dame has done some things that have made it to where the burden is not so much on him. Something you and I have been talking about for years, Sean. They put way too much on the shoulders of the head football coach of things he has to do outside of the football program. Now, some of that you have to do, but it's the volume with which you have to do it. They've expanded the staff. They've done some things. I think they understand why he was leaning towards leaving Notre Dame, and they're trying to alleviate that. And, but look, a win in the next 2 years could be like, hey, I've done everything I can do here. It's time to go. I could also see a world in which he wins one in the next year or two, and he's like, you know what? This felt good. Let's build a dynasty here. Let me put myself on the echelon of the Rockneys and the Leahys and the Parsegians, because if he wins one, he's on the level of Lou Holtz and Dan Devine. It's going to take at least two to get on the level of Coach Parsegian and Coach Leahy and Coach Rockney, right? I mean, that's kind of where it's at. I don't know how he's going to respond to that, nor can he really know that until it gets accomplished. I don't think it's a given that he leaves in the next 2 years anyway. It just depends on how the next couple of years go. And whether or not he feels this is the kind of challenge he still wants. I think there's also a lot of things that are outside of what we know, what rule changes, what NIL changes, what court decisions happen over the next year or two that make it to where this bleeding that is happening with college football, where you're losing a lot of coaches to the NFL. Now, we haven't seen a lot of head coaches leave to the NFL yet. That's coming. You're seeing a lot of assistant coaches bolting to the NFL, a lot. Notre Dame lost 3 assistant coaches this offseason. Only one of them went to another college team, and it was his alma mater. The other 2 went to the NFL. There was another Notre Dame coach who was getting a lot of looks this offseason from NFL teams that decided to stay. It's not other college teams that's the concern anymore. It's the NFL because of this insane year-round, 12-month, crazy, insane cycle where there is no downtime, recruiting's year-round, and now you have to re-recruit your roster every year. And I think that's just getting on some coaches, especially coaches who are dads, who want to be around their kids. And so until they fix that, then that's going to be a challenge. But if they do make some changes that fix that, then I could see a world in which he realizes he's got a pretty good thing here. So that's where I'm at. Any thoughts on that, Sean?
I just think it's really cool to watch people emotionally take on situations. You talked about the burnout, but also just the conditions and the surroundings of how everything played out in the postseason to mix with just the responsibilities of the head coaching position at Notre Dame. And the best of us, and all of us can relate, that it's easy to look outward in tough times or difficult situations, but the best of us eventually turn things back inward. That allows us to really operate in accountability, right? And move forward from it. So I think, NFL talk, some of us NFL teams taking advantage and trying to pounce, due to the way certain things happen. And, I'm sure they made certain pitches to him and to his representation, that might have at a certain point in time made his ears raise a little bit. But he's the head coach in Notre Dame, and he might get to a point on this journey where he's like, you know what, that ultimately, I've been tested and this is the place I want to be. I mean, I can see both sides. I can see him winning and wanting to take on the next challenge. And I can see him coming off of what he just went through and that being a true test of his loyalty and what he ultimately wants to do. And him coming off of that and saying, you know what, I want to be here.
It's like a lot of other long-term relationships, Sean. I mean, are you telling me that at no point in time before you and your wife got married, that there wasn't a time where things got rocky and you thought, is this really what I want to continue doing? I think we all have those moments, even if it's brief And what I found is you usually, like, there was a time that my wife and I were having some issues before we got married, and it wasn't really between us. It was more family stuff. And it was like, I had to really sit and decide, like, do I want this to be my life for the next 50 years? Do I want that to be my life? You know what I mean? Like, and then she had to understand, and we had to talk about, like, like, look, this is where we're at. And those conversations led to us discussing some things that we would not have discussed prior to marriage, which would have made our marriage a lot tougher. So it was either going to break us up or it was going to make us stronger. And coming out of it, obviously, it made us stronger because we ended up not splitting up and we ended up getting married, and very happily married, and in a better place now than we were in year 1, year 5, year 8. So I think all those times, it's like with anything, Sean, you go through difficult times, even if the difficulties aren't between the two of you. It's not like, it's just, perfect example. When you and your wife went through your cancer, it wasn't that you did something to her, she did something to you, but it was very challenging for the two of you. So I'll ask you, if I get personal for a second, I know the answer to this. Was your marriage stronger coming out of that than it was going in, because you went through that together?
Immensely stronger.
Exactly.
Much more appreciative of having time, appreciative of being able to be with each other. I couldn't touch my wife, you know what I'm saying, as a husband,
right,
for 3 to 4 months because of what I was going through. And that was a test for me. It was a test of, who I am as a man and as a husband. And it was definitely a test for her of emotions that she had to go through, but she had to deal with her personal emotions, but then the understanding to be able to support and be there. So yeah, that was definitely, in that example, that's a great example. You come out of it stronger and you learn a lot more, about yourself and about your relationship and just how strong it is going through stuff like that.
But sadly, as a pastor, as a man, we've both also seen scenarios where that type of thing can break a family up. And so you don't know what it's going to be like going into it. And that's kind of how I look at this Freeman situation. If both sides handle and it's not that anybody did anything. It's a stressful time. I've hit my I've overworked. It's been a rough year. Nobody did anything to anybody, but what are we going to do to come out of it? And if we come out of this thing together where we're working towards the same goal, then sometimes, you know what? I actually, there's a level of loyalty here now, you used love here now, that maybe I didn't even think I even had beforehand. And so I'm convinced this place for me, or it can cement, like, yeah, I love it here, but I want this other challenge. I want this other reality in my life. You just don't know. So that's kind of that's what makes this an unknown. I know what was true after the season, but that doesn't mean that same thing will be true after next season, no matter how the season goes. Raymond Harton asked, was DJ McKinney on that that OSU team in 2022? Yeah, he did play for Oklahoma State in 2022. I think he spent his first 2 years at Oklahoma State, I believe. He definitely started for them in 2023. I'm pretty sure he was on the team in 2022 as well. Let me see here. Yeah, he took a redshirt season. That was his freshman year. Saw action in 4 games, playing against Central Michigan, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, Texas Tech, and TCU. Finished year with 2 tackles, one of which was a solo. And then 23, he started that season and performed well. So, Jay Melvin asks, Brian, do you know how big Notre Dame's new facility will be? Will it be on Texas A&M or Oregon's level? Sean, I don't know about the size. It's going to be pretty big. I don't know that size matters as much as what's inside of it. And from everything I've heard, and I can't speak to how big Oregon or Texas A&M are. I have no clue.
Oregon, no, it's not on the scale of Oregon. And I don't know if Jay Melvin has actually been on campus, because it literally runs parallel to the indoor practice facility.
Yeah.
On the other side of the street, so that could kind of give you an idea.
Yeah, it runs parallel with that, and then the football, the first practice field.
Right.
Will it be as big as those facilities? I don't know. Will the interior be as state-of-the-art as anything in the country? Yes. That part will be. I don't know that size is always the most important thing, but it's a massive structure. It is very big. All right. Aaron Valerio, I know we all have our opinions on BK. Ultimately, why was he not a championship coach at Notre Dame and LSU? And why do you think he'll coach at the Power 4 level and do you think he'll coach at the Power 4 level within the next 3 years? I imagine if he wants to, somebody will hire him. Why wasn't he a championship coach? Number one, he is way too arrogant to be willing to look in the mirror and say, here's where I have fallen short. To say, this didn't work out because of me. He was way too arrogant to be able to look in the mirror and say, I made a bad hire. Every good coach on the planet would have fired Brian Van Gorder after 2014. Not after 2015, after 2014. But that would require you admitting you made mistakes. And he was unwilling to do that. When people would challenge him, he would undermine them. He would try to go at them. He tried to destroy careers of coaches that worked for him because they didn't always go along with what he wanted to say or do. And why? Because he was completely unwilling to admit that he might be the reason something isn't going right. He is an absolute narcissist. And ego is a very important thing to being a great coach, Sean. Name me a single great coach who didn't have an ego. There isn't one. Having an ego is far different than being a narcissist. Because someone with a strong ego who understands what it takes to win, as you mentioned. I mean, remember this? You've told the story before. I didn't see this show, but you were talking about how was it the SEC title game against Georgia in 2022? I think it was, where Nick Saban walks in, or was it 23? I forget which year it was. But they walk in and he's like, he knew like right away, everything we did defensively, game plan wise, has got to go. It's got to go. Because what we did, I mean, could you imagine Brian Kelly doing that? Heck no. You know, Urban Meyer realized after 1 year that this experiment with Ed Warner and Tim Beck as my co-OCs is a failure. He gets rid of him and brings in Tom Herman. They win a championship. You know what I mean? So it's like
23. It was Carson Beck's first year as a starter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are all things. Yes, that's right. It's the year they beat him with Jalen Milroe. But that's my whole point, Sean, is the great ones are very convinced that what they're doing is going to work, but also are willing to look in the mirror and say, how can we be better? You know, they're process-driven, not results-driven. Because people that are results-driven tend to be ones who are looking for reasons to praise themselves or covet praise from others. And so those are things that I look at and say his narcissism prevented him from being willing to admit that he might be the reason the program isn't as successful as where it was. The fact that he literally when Mike Denbrock left him in 2023, Brian Kelly started telling people that, well, he wasn't really the main one driving our offense anyway. This is my offense. This, you know, and it's like, why do that? Like, why do that? Just say, look, Mike did a great job for us, but you know what? I hired him and he did a great job, and I hired this guy and he's going to do a great job. Why do you have to take ownership away from someone else? When an assistant coach started getting some love from the media and the fan base, he would start going at that guy. Why? That's narcissism. I don't want anybody else to get love except for me. That's why. And the fact that he's a completely immoral, dishonest person only adds to the reasons he didn't win. And that's exactly why I said, now here's the thing. He's a smart football coach, Brian Kelly was. He knows football. He knows what it takes to win in a lot of ways, Sean. But there came a point in time where his love of himself got to the point where he was unwilling to be able to have the kind of heart-to-hearts with himself that a head coach needs to make. It's also why he tended to surround himself with people like Brian Polian, weak-minded people who, with nowhere close to the talent he has, who he doesn't view as a threat at all. That's why he liked to surround himself with people like that. You know, like, trust me, if he could have got rid of Harry Hiestand, he would have got rid of Harry Hiestand much sooner, because he hated that Harry Hiestand had the pull that he had. but he knew that people wouldn't stand for that. So that's why Brian Kelly didn't win, in my opinion, Sean. Just didn't have the personality to win.
It's as simple as that.
Andrew Gilmore, have we gotten final word on Lauren Landau to the NFL? I haven't heard anything, Andrew, but I know John Bryce has reported that NFL thing has passed and he's locked into Notre Dame. So as I've told you guys before, I mean, John also works for Football Scoop. And if John reports something like that, there's good reason to believe that that's accurate. John's very good when it comes to that kind of stuff for sure. So if John reports it, then I usually kind of go with it. And he has said that that's the case. Irishman 7114, what position that is not quarterback benefits the most from getting playing time in blowouts? What do you think, Sean?
Offensive line. Especially if the other team is still playing some of their good players. Those are good reps. Those are really good reps, especially with the volatility of offensive line or even defensive line, just the trenches. Like, you can get reps and blowouts against some good players on the other side, even if it's their backups. You can just get reps and get better. I think it bodes well.
I agree. I think offensive line is the big one. I think that's the biggest one. O-line and D-line, but even more so offensive line. Yeah. Andy Wine and Cheese with the 26 motto being leave no doubt. What do you think was Freeman's biggest lesson from 2025? Bury teams, run up scores, change fall camp to be ready in September, coaching philosophy, agreement, etc. I think the biggest thing that Marcus Freeman learned from 2025 is we cannot leave our destiny in the hands of anyone else. And honestly, Andy Wine and Cheese, I think it means a lot of those things. It means we need to make sure that we're prepared to be the best team on the field in weeks 1 and 2. It means that we need to make sure that we're doing the job to where we never are going to get beat in the trenches again. We need to make sure that we're the best team every Saturday. And I think that really comes down to a lot of what you said. I don't think burying teams and running up scores is a big takeaway for Marcus Freeman. I don't think Marcus Freeman views them not getting in the playoffs because they gave up a late touchdown to Pitt or because they gave up a couple late touchdowns to Stanford. I think he realizes that that's the excuse they used. But the reality is he knows that if we beat Miami or Texas A&M, we're in the playoffs. That's how he views it. And we need to handle our business in those moments. That's what I think. And that means getting everyone on the same page. That means making sure that that we're handling our fall camp in a way that we're better prepared, developing better player leadership to make sure that you don't have the ups and downs of things like that. I think there's a lot of those lessons that he learned. I don't think there's really one. If he only took one lesson away from last year, then he's probably forgetting. He's probably missing on some things that are very important towards them being a championship football team. I think that's a lot of that stuff, Sean.
I think one lesson that I will hope he takes is trust yourself and be definitive. Don't wait. You should have trusted yourself with the quarterback and been more definitive earlier. Like, trust what you see, trust your gut, make the decision. Right? Defensively, you see what's going on in the middle of that, the way your team is playing, the middle of the Miami game defensively. Like, trust what you see and then make definitive decisions right there. Don't wait. Don't let it linger. You're the head coach. That's the funniest thing. I told Brian this story. I went to watch Brother Rice, of course, who has a lot of 27 and 28 kids that Notre Dame is looking at. And they're playing this game. And their quarterback, who's actually, I think Notre Dame is going to play next year because he's going to Army. And so the kid got dinged up. And the coach is like, you're out. And so he starts running off the field. And the offensive coordinator is like, I didn't tell you to come out. And this dude stops everything. He calls timeout. And it turns around and faces the entire team and says, I'm the head coach. And everybody got it. Like he could have very well just been like, okay, I'll let it slide. He was like, no. We're gonna set this in stone. The cheerleaders are gonna know, the refs are gonna know, the other team is going to know, the parents in the stands are going to know. Like him coming out is my decision. I'm the head coach. And that's that. And so I just want him to be the head coach. Like, yo, this is my decision. If I have to take the fall for it, I'll take the fall for it. But be definitive, be quick, be decisive. When you see it going off the rails, correct it right there. That's it. And I think that's something that I hope he learns and takes from last season, that he let some things go linger a little bit too long.
Yep.
When he knew, he knew, nah, this needs to be corrected.
Yep. I don't know why, but that reminds me, Sean, of the story that I've heard 10 different Notre Dame players tell about that time in practice. I think it was Ricky Waters. He goes out there and he runs the ball and tackles a guy for a loss, and Lou yells, get the guard out, get the right guard out of there. And the guy goes out of there and they start to run the other right guard in, and he's like, no, get off the field. So they run the play. Coach, we don't have a guard. Run the play. They run the play. Ricky Waters gets drilled, again. And he goes, see, the same thing happens whether you're on the field or not on the field. The point was like, then gets back in there, they do it again, and then the guy gets all mad. But like, the point was like, look, it happened. We're not going to let this stand. You're not going to get our stud running back drilled in the backfield. So what am I do? I'm going to do something that's going to make my point. And I promise you, I've actually, some people have said it was Mirko Djurkovic. Some people have said it was Tim Grunhard. I don't know who the offensive lineman was, but it was a big name guy from what the stories go. But do you think he missed that block again ever? No. Same thing with coaches. Like you do things a certain way with an assistant coach. I promise you he doesn't make that mistake again. Can promise you of that. Here's one from Indy Wine and Cheese, Sean. If Notre Dame goes 12-0, how many ranked wins do you think we'll end up having? Now, let's define ranked wins, Sean, by teams that are ranked at the end of the year, end of the regular season. Let's define ranked wins that way. I'm going to go 4. I'm going to go Miami, SMU, BYU, and Navy. I think all 4 of those teams into the regular season ranked. What say you?
Man, you don't have any faith in Sparty?
No.
AKA
not this year.
I mean, doesn't Pat Fitzgerald does look like their mascot, doesn't he?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, even though he played at Northwestern, he's a better fit.
He looks just like Sparty.
Yes.
Same face and everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Nah. 4 is pretty good. I was trying to think of a sleeper, but no, I don't think Wisconsin or Michigan State get to that point.
They'll be improved, but improved enough to go 9-3, 8-4. I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, I agree. Andre Tonsel, why are so many college teams claiming poverty when it seems like they're still making money hand over fist? Well, the problem is that the college football programs have the same problem that our federal and local and state and local governments have. They know how to spend money. They know how to make money. The problem is they don't know how to spend the money that they make. And for a long time, they were able to kind of go above because there were ways they could overcome it. Now, as certain resources dry up, but also as your expenses have even grown, your expenses are outpacing your growth in revenue. And, that's a big thing for me. And COVID really woke up a lot of people to that. People are living outside of their means. It's like we were talking earlier, we're talking about taxes. Somebody says, well, they got to have taxes for roads. Like, listen, if they would get rid of all the waste and fraud and stuff in our government, they would have the money to pay for all those things and still have something left over. You know what I mean? Like, so don't tell me like fine, you don't want to pay police officers? Don't give me that crap. I'm not an idiot. I actually took a civics class and I have a basic understanding of economics and I understand what fraud is. You know what I'm saying? It's like that scene from Independence Day. You think it costs $40,000 for a hammer and a toilet seat? How do we pay for this? You think it costs $40,000 to get a hammer and a toilet seat? You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where they know how to spend money. They just don't know how to live within a budget. That's basically what it boils down to.
Yeah, there's too many examples of good stewardship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, big city, small city, medium-sized city. Um, Taxes in the south suburbs, especially in the area I live, are pretty similar, like town to town. And the budget surplus is vastly different depending upon which village you're in. Like you go to one village and you can look at their high schools and you can look at what's surrounding that area. You see a stark difference, and the difference between taxes are very small. So that leads you to believe that the people that are in charge are doing a better job of making sure that the money is distributed the way it should be distributed. And there you go.
Yep. Let's go. Jay Melvin says, Brian, I've always wanted your thoughts on this. Saban has alluded to that if he stayed at LSU, he would have won more titles. Based on your knowledge of the college football world, is LSU a better job than Alabama? Sean, I want to get your thoughts on this first.
You know what? When we were talking about this earlier, I actually pulled up Nick Saban's career. And his career at LSU probably syncs up better to the challenge that Marcus Freeman had. Like he came from Michigan State, he goes to LSU, and he had multiple seasons at LSU where he was underwhelming, where they lost 3 or more games. And that was like sandwiched in between was the national championship season. And that's the last disappointing season was the season that sent them off to the NFL. And so they got what they asked for, which is the national championship, but I don't think they thought they were going to get 3 lost seasons when they hired him from Michigan State, because the expectation at LSU is to come in and win national championships. So I think he had learned his lesson, all the lessons he needed to learn once he went to the NFL and came back. And that's why you saw him, even after being 7-6 in year one, with probably some unfathomable losses to the
Louisiana,
fan base. Like,
Monroe.
Monroe, like really? But then they hit the road running. He figured it out. He got everything roster-wise together. And it was probably a little bit easier in the SEC back then because it was all about running the ball. And once he figured that out, that was the easiest thing. It probably was more difficult for him to switch midstream when things changed than it was to come in and kind of establish what he wanted from a physical standpoint, because the SEC was just, this is what it is. And then once you start getting all these different teams that want to spread the ball out, to switch, that's more impressive to me. For him to switch from what he knows midstream, and then I think the second run was probably more dominant, if you really look at it, than his first run as national championships at Alabama. So yeah, I would definitely say Bama's a better job, because I don't know. I think the expectations at LSU are kind of like a little bit wild. Right? Because Bama has had a Bear Bryant before, and then they've had a championship after Bear Bryant. LSU is almost like the team that wants to be Bama. Like they produce a lot of NFL talent, but in terms of like the program, I'm not going to be disrespectful and say that Bama's little brother, but
yeah, that's Auburn.
Yeah, but no, I don't think it's a better job. I just don't, looking at it, for me, I just don't see the LSU job being better than Bama.
I agree. I think there's obviously a lot of talent. I think sometimes it's overstated a little bit.
Yeah.
That assumes you're going to get all of the talent. You're not.
Yeah.
I think LSU is a great job. I think you could argue, there's an argument to make that today LSU is a better job than Alabama. Today. It's at least arguable. I think definitely back then Alabama was the better job. prior to NIL and stuff like that, Bama was a better job for a host of reasons. I mean, look, prior to 2003, when Saban won the title, Sean, LSU had only won one national championship.
Mm-hmm.
That was in 1958. This is not a program like they thought they should be champions, but they were not a program that was actually doing that. You know, Alabama had won multiple national championships. I mean, not even just under Bear Bryant. I mean, Bear Bryant obviously won multiple national championships, but you know, Gene Stallings won a championship at Alabama. You know, and then of course Alabama claims like 25 other national championships from different years. You know, like the stadium, Wallace Wade, he won national championships. You know, and in the 20s and 30s, and you know, they won one in 1941. You know, so Bear Bryant won his first one in 1961. You know, so Frank Thomas, who was head coach in 1941, won one of their claimed national championships. Now, again, Bama has more fraudulent national championships than like any program ever, but there's still a lot of championships. I mean, they claim a title in 73. That's one of their claimed national championships. You know, that's also one that Notre Dame claims. Why? Because Bama claims the championship of, I think it was the UPI, I think is what it was, which is now the coaches poll. They gave out their championships before the bowl games. The AP was after bowl games. So Notre Dame beats Alabama in the Sugar Bowl. Notre Dame wins championship. Alabama still claims it because they got theirs before the game was even played. So there's like a lot of those. But still, the point is 3 or 4 different coaches won championships at Alabama. It took LSU till 2019 to get to their fourth total national championship. You know, so I just feel like Bama overall has been primarily a better job. I do believe that might be changing a little bit now in the NIL world. A little bit, but that's even still debatable. I think they're both great jobs. I think they're both elite jobs. I just think Alabama's is slightly better when Saban took over. Now, here's the thing. Part of the reason that I don't know that Alabama's as good of a job now is because I think the shadow of Nick Saban is going to make it a less attractive job. I could win 4 titles and people are going to say I'm not as good as Nick Saban. You win 2 titles at LSU, they're the greatest coach that program's ever had. You know, I mean, that's just a different scenario. Sometimes a coach can ruin a program for other people. And Saban's success was such that I think it does make it a little bit like, do you really want that job? Now, that might change in 5-10 years when the shadow of Nick Saban's not as great, but I mean, Kalen DeBoer is on the hot seat at Alabama. He just took them to the SEC championship game and to the playoffs. You know what I mean? Like, name me another program who's about to fire their coach for playing in the the conference championship game and then getting the playoffs. Maybe Ohio State. That might be the only other one that would have the coach on the hot seat after that. That's about it. So I think that factors into it. Yeah. All right. So here's the last one, Sean. This is a super chat from Lou Holtz, Thunder and Bolts. I'd like to bring my wife and 4 kids to their first game next season. Should I rent an RV from the trip for the trip from Philly? My wife might kill me, but it always seemed dope, like a dope way to bring a fam out. God bless. Well, let me just say this. Number one is I've never taken an RV anywhere. I've always dreamed of getting an RV and going somewhere. Like, that's one of the things Ange and I have talked about, like buying an RV and just because like I'd get one that's like souped up with like internet and all that. So I can like do shows from the road. We've thought about doing stuff like that. You know, if we get past the point where, well, there's things that if we get past certain points in life that and things don't work out a certain way, then that's something we've thought about doing. So I think the idea of it's pretty cool, but for me, it's just sort of like that cool idea. I don't know what it's actually like. What I would encourage you to do is I would actually encourage you to reach out to Ryan Roberts, who used to work at IB. Ryan actually this was before he worked for me. Him and his dad and a couple buddies actually got an RV from Jersey and brought it out to Notre Dame. So the reason I would say reach out to Ryan or somebody else who's done that is because the trip would be fun. I mean, I think that's just about whether or not your family would have fun in a condensed space for a week. What Ryan could maybe tell you about is what it's like actually parking and doing other things at the place. That I don't have an answer for. He might even tell you, like, get to South Bend and rent a car for game day or something. Who know? I don't know, but maybe reach out to Ryan and see what he thinks about as far as like the accessibility of an RV at a place like Notre Dame. I have no idea what it's like. Raymond Hart said there's an RV park near South Bend. Right, I've heard all that, but like I don't know the specifics of that, so I can't really help you. I think the biggest thing is, would your family have fun in an RV together? That I mean, you know what I mean? Like that's ultimately what it is. Now you could say, well, flying's quicker, but I've seen some families have some pretty miserable airport experiences where you're like, I don't know if that family's going to still be together when they get back home, because they look like they want to kill each other and they're on their way on vacation. That's between you and your family. So that's what I would encourage you to do, is reach out to Ryan. Because actually he parked his RV in our driveway. So that way he didn't have to go to the park. So like I let them come and park in our driveway. This is back before he worked for me. But he would probably be a better person to speak to on that, Sean. But yeah, when I was younger, like when I still watched baseball, my dream was always one of my retirement dreams was to get an RV and spend the whole summer driving to every Major League Baseball park. I don't care so much about that now because I don't really watch baseball anymore. But now it's kind of like if I was doing this job and I went to every Notre Dame game in the RV, like at a big IB RV, you know what I mean? Like that'd be a lot of fun. Do like shows from the road, that'd be a lot of fun. I don't have the kind of money to buy an RV, but it'd still be kind of cool. So that's mine. I don't know if you're an RV guy or not, Sean, but
my wife
I feel
is,
like you kind of have to be if you're in Indiana.
No, my wife is. I am not. She still wants to buy one and drive from here to California, and I'm not doing it. So,
what is your anti-RV thoughts? Like what's your
I'm not a small space person. I'm just not.
Yeah.
Just not. Like she has a dream of it's actually a battle right now. Like our daughter is gone. As soon as her life becomes more solidified with career and everything, she's like, yeah, I want to go downtown and have a condo. And I'm like, what? And I understand her standpoint. She's like, I don't want to have to worry about taking care of the lawn and all this other stuff. I'm like, I get it. I'm like, dude, I don't want anybody above me, to my left, to my right. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. I just grew up in a home my entire life. So I'm like, the compromise with maybe we can just get one that we can go to every now and then and still have a home. So that's my reason. Yeah.
I wouldn't want to give up our home.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want it to be our home.
Yeah.
I would just like to own one where if we wanted to go on 2-month-long trips, we could, and we just have somebody occasionally come over and check on our house.
Yeah.
Take the dogs with us, and yeah. But I couldn't have it be my home.
No.
But I was just curious why, because like I'll never go camping again, and I've got legitimate reasons why I'll never go camping again. But Angela always wants to go camping. I'm like, good. No camping for me.
I just don't want, and it, I'm sorry. I've grown up with square footage and big backyards. So for me, that's what I need.
That's what
I need. That's what
I'm with you. I couldn't live in a condo either because I just get, how I am with like sounds and stuff, Sean. Could you imagine me living in a condo where I can hear other people's music and tapping on the walls and stuff like that? That would not be good. Yeah. I don't want, the dream for me is I would love to save up enough money someday to buy some land and like have a house built just kind of out in the country. Just I don't have a neighbor behind me. It'd be kind of nice to have neighbors like this way and that way, but behind me, just nothing forever.
Forever.
Several acres and have a legit garden, have a barn that's got my bunker underneath.
You could literally walk out there to get the mail in your underwear.
I could have a range in my backyard. You know what I'm saying? Like I could have a shooting range in my backyard. Could you imagine that? That'd be amazing.
I'm sure that would be like heaven for you.
Oh gosh, yes. Dude, you'd be over my house all the time. Don't even lie. You'd be like, hey Brian,
They're like, where are all these?
Can I get
What
some
are
rain?
these broken bottles and aluminum cans from?
Sean, I have paper targets, man. I keep telling you this.
Oh man.
I don't know why you insist on bringing these freaking bottles and cans, So yeah, that would be amazing.
20 acres sounds amazing
Yeah.
to grow up on. So
Yeah, have a nice big garden, a nice little pond. Have an underground bunker in my shooting range. That'd be amazing.
Yes.
Nice little you can have like a basketball court, but you got to have money to have all that, and I don't make that kind of money, but it'd be nice. Be nice.
You cut your own grass, don't you, or do you hire?
Nah, last couple years I haven't, but I'm going to this year. There's a kid that he goes in Indiana, but I met him at the Chiefs ice cream store, but he was a high school kid, and he was like, little entrepreneur. He's like, hey, I want to do this, and so I like to support him, and so I pay him $50 a week to pay it. But I think this year I'm gonna mow my own lawn, just because like he's still doing it. He's a great kid. He's an awesome kid. He goes to IU. But it's just like I don't get outdoors enough. And that's a way that I, you know what I mean? Like I just want to be more active doing that now. So it's all part of my.
You're gonna buy riding? Do you have
our yard's not that big. No,
okay.
Our yard's not that big. No. If I had a rider for my yard, I'd have to kick my own butt. Like, dude, you are lazy.
Buy one for the property you talking about.
Oh, I definitely would have one for that. Every time I'm annoyed or my wife's annoyed at me, hey, honey, I'm gonna go mow. You just mowed yesterday. I know. I just didn't do a good job. I'm gonna go mow again. Out there for 2 hours.
I left a patch over here just in case.
Listening to something, put some on my headphones and just Yep. I'd absolutely. Oh man, there's no way I'd have a push mower on that kind of property, man. Heck yeah. So yeah, that'd be the dream, Sean. That'd be the dream. But yeah, I feel like you have to have a certain size yard before you can get a rider. Our next door neighbor had a riding lawnmower. His front yard's slightly bigger than mine. His backyard is not even close to as big as mine because he's got a pool in it.
Okay.
I don't have a pool. So like there's very little thing. And he would get the ride. I'm like, bro.
Why are you riding on it?
Great. But it was funny. He was a great dude though. So what he would do is he would then just randomly, he'd look over my fence. And if my yard needed mowed, he'd just
drive.
Mow it. Yeah, he was a great guy. Loved him. He's awesome. I think him and his wife retired. They're living down in Florida now. Great guy. I was like, dude, come on now, man. You can't be it. Your yard is not built for a riding lawnmower. But once he started mowing my lawn, I was like, bro, hey, I get it. Because now our 2 yards together, that's enough to have a riding lawnmower. For sure. All right, Sean. Well, great stuff, man. Thanks for being with me today. I really appreciate you. Somebody asked earlier, Sean, are you guys going live tonight?
No, I have to teach Bible class tonight. So we're back on tomorrow.
Okay. What time? Give the people a time, Sean. Give the people a plug.
Tomorrow, 3:30. Well, 3:30 Pacific, 5:30 Chicago time.
6:30 Eastern.
6:30 Eastern. Yep. I think I got that right.
Yeah, you got that right. Yeah, because Chicago's 2 hours in front of Pacific, and then I'm 3 hours in front of Pacific. Right. Yeah, you got that
and
right.
Time's about to go forward, right? Next couple of weeks.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think
I hate, which I hate, by the way. Absolutely hate.
Because we're gaining daylight slowly.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep, no doubt. Well, tonight our guys are going live at 5 o'clock here very, very shortly. So you can check them out. And hit that like button on your way out, folks. I'll let you guys go. Make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. For Sean, I'm Brian. Trev will be back with me tomorrow. Have a great rest of your day, folks. And I'll see you again very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.